Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Becky Bliefnick. Becky and Tim met while studying at Quincy University. Becky majored in biology and loved tennis. Tim was an excellent football player, popular in school. Those close to Tim commented that he was a cheerful, innocent, and friendly guy. Tim always greeted everyone with a warm hug. With an enthusiastic and friendly personality, Tim was very loved by his friends. On the other hand, Becky's friends described her as a cheerful person, capable of making the surrounding atmosphere bright and positive just by her presence. With her positive energy and bright smile, Becky easily made a good impression on everyone around her. Both Becky and Tim were attractive people, and they seemed to complement each other perfectly. The combination of attractive appearance and compatible personalities made them an ideal couple in the eyes of everyone. 2 years after graduating from Quincy University, Becky and Tim decided to get married and start a new phase in their lives. Being a practical couple, they prioritized saving money over spending. Instead of buying an engagement ring and planning a lavish honeymoon, they decided to use their savings to put a down payment on their first home. Becky had dreamed of becoming a doctor, but ultimately did not pursue this career. Although she loved medicine, Becky felt a stronger calling to motherhood. She longed to experience the joy and happiness of motherhood. This dream came true when she and her husband Tim had 3 sons. Becky loved spending quality time with her children and watching them grow up. As her children grew older, Becky decided to pursue her own dreams. She chose to go back to school to get her nursing degree. On the other hand, Tim has always been a performer, from his time in community theater in Quincy to creating comedic videos on social media. He has the ability to captivate audiences with his humor and charisma. In 2008, Tim decided to challenge himself by entering the competition American Gladiators. Although he did not make it to the final round, he tried his best and made it to the final audition round of the show. In September 2019, Tim took a new opportunity to attract attention and showcase his talent. The production team of the popular TV show Family Feud invited Tim and his family to participate. However, Becky could not join him because she was attending nursing school. Determined to make the most of the opportunity to participate in the show, Tim gathered his family, including his parents and brothers. Family Feud is a television game show where 2 families compete against each other by guessing the most popular answer from a survey of 100 people. Steve Harvey, the famous host of Family Feud, asked Tim, "What do you think is the most popular answer to the question, 'What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?'" Tim, known for his sense of humor, surprised Steve Harvey in the audience with his clever answer. He said, "Honey, I love you, but said I do." This statement was shocking and made the whole studio laugh. Although this answer was not expected, it still won second place on the leaderboard, earning Tim and his family many points. The Bliefnick family competed on Family Feud for 3 episodes, winning a total of $20,000. The prize money was divided equally among the family members. There was one notable exception, however. Tim did not share his reward with his wife, Becky. After many years of marriage, Becky and Tim's relationship began to strain. When Becky decided to become a nurse, Tim strongly objected. He said he was worried about Becky's health because nursing was often a high-stress job. Tim also noticed that Becky often had difficulty controlling her patience and stress when caring for the children. This made him worry about her ability to handle the job of a nurse. However, Becky's friends had a different view of Tim's reaction. They believed that Tim did not want Becky to be independent and free to pursue her own interests. Over time, they noticed that Becky was no longer as happy in the marriage as she had been before. Things were going well for the first 5 years, but then Tim began to act more controlling and manipulative towards Becky. Becky's friends noticed that while Becky was putting a lot of effort into her studies and nursing work, Tim was not contributing his fair share to the household chores. Tim did not participate in cleaning and taking care of their son. Instead, he left Becky to shoulder all the household chores after her long, tiring shifts at the hospital. Becky noticed that their marriage was struggling and wanted to work on this with Tim. She suggested that the two of them go to marriage counseling, hoping that this would help them improve the situation and mend their relationship. However, Tim refused this proposal, leaving Becky feeling disappointed. Although Becky tried her best to save their marriage, Tim had other intentions. In January 2012, after 11 years of marriage, Tim suddenly filed for divorce from Becky. This decision shocked Becky, as she had shown determination and effort to maintain the relationship. However, Tim's intentions were clear. He moved out of the house and into a new place on the other side of town. Tim explained that the main reason for his decision to divorce was due to the change in Becky's personality after she became a nurse. He found that her new career had significantly affected her behavior, causing a negative impact on their marriage. The divorce process was stressful. Tim and Becky could not find common ground and their relationship more deteriorated. During the divorce proceedings, Tim and Becky fought over a number of issues, including child custody, property division, and alimony. The situation became so tense that Tim filed for a protective order against Becky. He accused her of stalking and harassing him. Tim cited one specific incident. During an parent-teacher, Becky became aggressive and argued with him. As evidence, Tim provided a cell phone video of Becky banging on his car door outside the school after the conference. Becky, however, had a different view of the situation. She believed that Tim was the one who was harassing her. Becky texted her friends to share her concerns. In the messages, she described multiple instances of Tim's violent behavior, including yelling at her, pushing her in front of the children, and throwing things around the house. Becky sent a text message to a friend, expressing her deep concern about Tim's mental health. She noticed that Tim was becoming more hostile and unpredictable. Recently, a co-worker of Becky's was murdered by her partner, which made her even more fearful for her safety. Becky began to suspect that Tim might harm her, similar to what had happened to her co-worker. As a result, Becky sent a text message to her sister, saying that if anything happened to her, Tim would be the one to pay the most attention. Becky was worried that Tim would use force to gain custody of their child. This message made Becky's sister very worried about her sister's safety. She understood that Becky's fears were justified and that Becky needed immediate help. Out of concern for Becky's safety, her sister convinced her to seek help from the Domestic Violence Support Center. After some consideration, Becky decided to file for a protective order against Tim. After reviewing both Tim and Becky's requests for protective orders, the judge decided not to grant either of them. Instead, the judge ordered them to stay away from each other's homes, except to exchange custody of their children. On February 22, Becky and Tim's 3 sons, ages 12, 10, and 5, stayed overnight at Tim's house. Tim's house is about a mile from where Becky lives. The divorce proceedings between Becky and Tim are expected to be finalized within the next week. The next day, Tim called Becky's father. He explained that he had been unable to reach Becky and that she had not picked up her sons from school as usual. Becky's father, knowing that his daughter was devoted to her children, realized that something serious must have happened that had left Becky unable to perform her duties as a mother. Concerned about Becky's health, her father drove to her house immediately. When he arrived, he entered the house and walked through the rooms, calling Becky's name. Receiving no response, he went upstairs and entered his daughter's bedroom. Inside, he witnessed a horrifying scene: Becky lying motionless in a pool of blood, her body covered in gunshot wounds. Investigators arrived at Becky's house after her father discovered her body in the bathroom. Becky's body was lying on her back, covered in blood and showing no signs of life. Investigators began their investigation by thoroughly inspecting the exterior of the home. After a thorough search, they determined that the suspect had entered the home by forcing open an upstairs window in a child's bedroom. This discovery revealed that the suspect had used a porch chair to gain easy access to the home and onto the roof. Investigators followed the trail they believed the suspect had taken. They headed toward Becky's bedroom, where the door appeared to have been kicked in or forcefully broken. The damage to the bedroom door indicated that the suspect had entered the room, most likely to look for Becky. Evidence indicated that Becky attempted to hide in the bathroom, but the suspect followed and caught up with her. The suspect eventually shot Becky in the bathroom. While examining the crime scene around the bathroom where Becky's body was found, investigators stumbled upon her cell phone. When investigators examined Becky's phone, they found a call to 91126 at 1:11 a.m. This discovery helped them develop a theory about what happened that night. They believe that while being chased by the suspect in her home, Becky tried to call 911 for help, but in a panic, she mistakenly dialed 91126. Before Becky could call 911 again, investigators believe that the suspect grabbed the phone from her. The mistaken call occurred at 1:11 a.m., so they think Becky may have been murdered around that time. However, when police investigated Becky's neighborhood, no one remembered hearing any strange noises at that time. This raised suspicions for investigators. Since Becky had multiple gunshot wounds, it was unlikely that no one heard anything. When investigators thoroughly searched Becky's home, they quickly determined that the murder was not a burglary, as nothing was missing. However, the perpetrator left behind a number of important pieces of evidence. Most notably, a partial shoe print was found near the entrance. This shoe print could help identify the make and model of the suspect's shoes, as well as provide information about the size and shape of their feet. At the scene, investigators found 8 9mm bullet casings and several small pieces of plastic scattered on the floor near Becky's body. Despite the extensive evidence collected, investigators were still unable to come to a definitive conclusion. Therefore, they decided to send the collected evidence to a forensic lab for further analysis. Detectives are investigating whether any of Becky's neighbors had installed security cameras outside their homes. They discovered that a neighbor had installed a camera on the side of their house after their car was broken into a year ago. The camera was facing the neighbor's driveway, which bordered Becky's house. It was set up to detect motion and send an alert to the homeowner. However, on the night of Becky's death, the camera did not capture any important footage. As they investigated further, investigators discovered that on the day of the murder, a man was seen walking down the back path of Becky's house at 1:05 a.m. on the security camera footage. About 48 minutes later, the man was seen walking back in the opposite direction. Becky's neighbor's security camera also recorded a similar incident about a week earlier. On February 14th, footage from the neighbor's security camera showed Becky seeing a dark figure lurking around her house. After discovering this, Becky's neighbor immediately informed her of the news. After the neighbor reported the mysterious stranger, Becky began to feel anxious. Although she had not seen anyone on her house, she had heard noises in her backyard the night before, which frightened her. Police reviewed security camera footage from Becky's neighbors and continued to search the neighborhood for additional footage. They found video from a home near the Quiney bus stop that showed a bicyclist wearing dark clothing moving toward Becky's home. The videos showed a bicyclist wearing dark clothing, matching the description of the mystery person in the footage of Becky's driveway. After analyzing the time of the footage, detectives suspected that the bicyclist was the person in the footage. Although Becky's neighbor's security cameras did not capture the mystery person on the night of her murder, police did stumble upon footage of a bicyclist heading toward Becky's home shortly before and after the incident. The video footage showed a person matching the description of the person lurking in Becky's driveway before she was murdered. While the video was helpful to the investigation, the poor quality of the footage made it difficult to gather details. Detectives were unable to determine the gender or identity of the person in the video due to the graininess of the image. However, they did notice one important detail: the bicycle the person was riding appeared to have no reflectors on its wheels. When Becky was murdered, her sister immediately thought of Tim, Becky's soon-to-be ex-husband, as a possible suspect. She had witnessed their tense divorce and shared this thought with the detectives investigating the case. Based on this information, the police began to consider Tim as the prime suspect. Notably, the murder occurred just a week before Becky and Tim finalized their divorce, making the situation particularly suspicious. During the investigation of Becky's murder, investigators made an important discovery. They found a bicycle without reflectors on its wheels, similar to the one seen on the security camera, just a block away from Tim's house. This discovery raised suspicions about Tim, prompting detectives to seek a search warrant for his home. When police executed the search warrant, Tim was cooperative and respectful. He willingly stood outside the home with the officers while investigators searched his property. On March 13, 2023, Tim was arrested and charged with Becky's murder 2 weeks earlier. When Tim's mugshot was released, Becky's family and friends were shocked by his appearance. Instead of the well-groomed man they knew, they saw a completely different Tim, unkempt and seemingly frail. Many believe that this change reflected the negative impact that the divorce had had on Tim. His unkempt hair and shabby clothes were a clear sign of the deterioration in his previously well-groomed appearance. The divorce was blamed for Tim's declining physical and mental health, according to friends and family. However, Tim explained that he had grown his hair long to take part in a charity campaign to raise awareness for cancer research. A clip from the Family Feud show in which Tim said he wished he had not married his wife when he was arrested for murdering her caused a stir. Many people saw this reaction as an uncanny sign of Tim's true feelings for his wife. Some even suggested it was a warning sign of potential problems in their relationship. Investigators carefully examined Tim's phone and discovered that he had created a fake Facebook account under the name John Smith. During the investigation, they discovered that Tim had been looking to buy a bicycle on Facebook. He was particularly interested in a blue Schwinn without reflectors on the wheels. This was notable because it matched the description of the bike found abandoned near Tim's home, just a block away. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Tim, convicting him was difficult. Tim was held without bail and ordered a speedy trial, requiring the prosecution to bring the case to trial within 90 days of his arrest. However, the prosecution faced a major challenge in convincing a jury of Tim's guilt due to the lack of two key elements that are often considered decisive in criminal cases: a confession and DNA evidence. Without these two elements, proving Tim's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt became very difficult. In prosecuting Tim for his wife's murder, the prosecution faced a major challenge. 3 months after Becky was murdered in their home, Tim appeared in court on May 23, 2023. During the trial, the state presented evidence that investigators had collected at the scene. A key piece of evidence was the plastic debris found around Becky's body. The prosecution claimed that it was from an Aldi grocery bag. They also told the jury that several similar bags were found during a subsequent search of Tim's home. The prosecution alleged that Tim used the Aldi plastic bag as a silencer when he shot his ex-wife multiple times, in order to muffle the sound of the gunfire and avoid detection. They claimed that Tim left DNA on the bags. An expert who testified said it was highly likely that the DNA found on the bags belonged to Tim. Prosecutors presented evidence to the jury about a crowbar found in Tim's basement that they believed could have been used to pry open a window at the victim's home on the night of her murder. However, an expert testified that although there were some slight similarities between the marks on the window and the crowbar, she could not say for certain that the crowbar was used in the crime. The prosecution presented several new pieces of evidence to bolster its case. They presented searches that Tim had conducted on his phone, including how to open a door with a crowbar, how to make a silencer for a homemade pistol, how to clean gunpowder off his hands, and the average response time for Quincy police. An expert was called to testify that she had compared the shell casings found at the crime scene to the shell casings found in Tim's home. She determined that 27 of the shell casings from Tim's home were fired from the same 9mm weapon used in the murder. When investigators searched Tim's home, they did not find Becky's 9mm gun. Tim claimed that he had not seen the gun for months before Becky was killed. During the trial, the defense did not call any witnesses. After a 6-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before finding Tim guilty. Ultimately, Tim was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Although Tim maintained his innocence and planned to appeal, Becky's family believed the sentence was deserved. Becky's sister spoke to Tim about the consequences of his actions on his sons, emphasizing that his choices had caused them pain. Even though Becky is gone, her sister promises to keep her memory alive in the hearts of her 3 sons. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was viewed as a model family due to their stable economic background and well-behaved children, earning them genuine admiration from those around them. William Petit, the father, was a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he demonstrated natural leadership skills. He was also the top student in his class, going on to earn a law degree from Dartmouth University. However, William's true passion lay in helping others, caring for the sick, and making a positive impact on the social. After completing his law degree, he decided to pursue a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. It was during his 3rd year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh that William met Jennifer Hawk, a nurse specializing in oncology and co-director of the Health Center for a pre-graduate internship program. They fell deeply in love, with those who knew them confirming that they were perfectly suited for each other. The couple got married in 1985. 4 years later, they had their first daughter, Haley. Her birth inspired them to have a large family, which prompted them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. Following childbirth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and internship co-director. However, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease with no cure that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her family remained supportive throughout. At 10 years old, Haley started raising money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society, generating significant funds over time. Michaela also performed well academically. And when Haley went to college, Michaela planned to take over the fundraising efforts so she could continue supporting their community. The summer before, Michaela had learned to cook and she enjoyed preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this daily activity leads the family to an encounter with a criminal. One July evening in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner, but she needed additional ingredients. She and her mother went to the nearest market, where they coincidentally encountered Joshua Komisarjevsky, a man recently released from prison. Joshua had experienced a traumatic and complicated childhood. He was born to teenage parents. He was put up for adoption a week after birth and adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, renowned artists in Europe known for their strict and religious upbringing. Joshua had a high IQ, but struggled in school, prompting his parents to decide that homeschooling was a better option. During his trial, Joshua revealed that he had been sexually abused by a cousin in his childhood, but his family chose not to address the issue. This traumatic experience contributed to the development of his rebellious personality. At the age of 14, Joshua was accused of abusing his sister. Around the same time, he committed his first burglary. In 2002, he was arrested for 18 charges of burglary and resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he gave a chilling confession, revealing that he enjoyed invading other people's private space, enjoyed the feeling of being close to them while they slept, and found particular satisfaction in making others feel insecure. Released on parole in 2007 at the age of 27, officials deemed Joshua a danger to society, describing him as a perverted individual and disturbing behavior. Despite these warnings, the jury declared him fit for release. Following his release, Joshua stayed in a residence for ex-convicts, where he met his accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had spent a significant portion of his life in prison, starting with his first incarceration at the age of 16 in 1980. He was frequently arrested for violent robbery and burglary, and after being sentenced in 2004, he was granted parole in 2006, which led him to the same halfway house where he met Joshua. On July 22, 2007, Joshua trailed Michaela Petit and her mother as they traveled to a nearby market to purchase. He paid close attention to and noted specific details about Michaela's vehicle, facial features, and blonde hair. After completing their shopping, Michaela and her mother returned home, having no knowledge that Joshua had been following them. Later, Hayes sent Joshua a text message indicating he was impatient to start and needed a drink soon. Hayes asked if their plan was still on, to which Joshua confirmed to be yes. When Hayes asked how much longer he had to wait, Joshua told him he was busy putting his child to bed and advised Hayes to be patient. Hayes responded by expressing his eagerness to proceed. Meanwhile, Joshua secretly follows the Petit family in his car to find out the exact location of their house. The whole family was enjoying a nice dinner together, but they unaware that it would be the last time they would all be together. Later that night, while everyone was asleep except for William Petit, who had dozed off in the living room, their peace was disrupted by strange noises inside the house. William remembered feeling groggy, in pain, and unable to think clearly. Joshua and Hayes had entered the house through an unlocked door, initially planning to rob the family. However, upon finding a baseball bat, they used it to brutally beat William, who remained conscious despite the assault. One of the intruders threatened to shoot him if he moved. William was then restrained with ropes, tied to a pole in the basement. Joshua and Haley proceeded upstairs to Haley's room, where they found her sleeping. They tied Haley and Michaela to their bedposts, covering their heads with pillowcases. Meanwhile, in the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit had fallen asleep, but was soon woken up by Joshua and Hayes. They controlled Jennifer by tying her hands and feet, feeling that they now had control of the house. Joshua and Hayes then took their time to thoroughly inspect the house, and even stopped to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After collecting valuables such as jewelry, cash, Joshua and Hayes decided it was time to leave. It seemed the Petit family's ordeal was finally over as they heard the burglars leave the house. However, their nightmare was far from over. Joshua and Hayes sold the items at a pawn shop, but after realizing they hadn't made as much money as they expected, their greed drove them to return to the house. When they returned to the Petit house, they discovered a check register with $40,000 and decided to steal a total of $155,000. Once back, they informed Jennifer of their plan, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't comply. Desperate and prioritizing her daughter's safety, Jennifer reluctantly agreed to accompany Hayes to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence to enter Michaela's room. He untied Michaela, undressed her, and took photos with his cell phone. He assaulted her, recording the act. Afterward, Joshua took her to the bathroom to clean her, aiming to eliminate any DNA evidence. He ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The evidence that Joshua raped Michaela was found during her autopsy. State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver discovered Joshua's DNA in Michaela's body. At the bank, everything initially seemed to go smoothly. However, Hayes failed to notice Jennifer's actions while she was in line. Before approaching the teller, Jennifer wrote a note on a flyer asking for help. The note read that her name was Jennifer Petit, she needed to withdraw $115,000 from her savings account, and that her family was in danger, so Jennifer asked them to call the police, or her family would be killed. The teller gave Jennifer the money despite her lack of identification. With the cash, Jennifer left the bank and returned to the car with Hayes. The bank employee immediately called the police to report the incident. However, the manager told the 911 dispatcher that Jennifer had indicated the home invaders were being nice and only wanted money. Cheshire Police received a report from the bank and they set up a vehicle perimeter around the area without alerting the suspect. From a distance, the police observed the situation without intervening. Meanwhile, back at the house, Joshua told his accomplice about his actions towards Michaela, implying that he could easily harm Jennifer as well. Hayes then grabbed Jennifer, pinned her to the ground, and started removing her clothes. William heard his wife being assaulted upstairs and managed to flee. One of the intruders responded, "Don't worry, it's all going to be over in a couple of minutes." William crawled to the basement stairs and eventually made it to the backyard. William thought the intruders would shoot them all soon, so he knew he had to act fast. Joshua checked on William but found he had escaped. According to Hayes' confession, Joshua told Hayes that William had gotten away while Hayes was raping Jennifer in the living room. Upon hearing this, Hayes strangled Jennifer to death while continuing to assault her. Shortly after, they heard William shouting for help. A neighbor, who initially didn't recognize William due to his injuries, immediately called 911. Realizing the police would arrive soon, Joshua and Hayes tried to eliminate evidence. Hayes and Joshua doused Jennifer's lifeless body, various parts of the house including Michaela and Haley's bedroom, and also Michaela and Haley themselves with gasoline. Hayes and Joshua started a fire at the scene, unaware that the police had blocked off the area just a few miles away. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle and were surrounded by officers. The two perpetrators, Joshua and Hayes, who were later identified as ex-convicts, were pulled from their vehicle and arrested. Meanwhile, the fire at the house was spreading rapidly. An ambulance arrived and took William Petit, was seriously injured, to the nearest hospital. Firefighters soon followed and attempted to put out the blaze. Once the fire was extinguished, they discovered a horrific scene inside the house. The first body they found was Jennifer's, which was badly charred and had rope around her ankles. On the second floor, they found Michaela tied to her bed. Her body completely consumed by the fire. In a desperate bid to escape, Haley had managed to break free restraints but collapsed just a few meters away due to smoke inhalation. William had also managed to free himself and crawled to a neighbor's yard for help, but the neighbor didn't initially recognize him due to the severity of his injuries. Both Joshua and Hayes admitted to the murders during questioning. Detectives noticed that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout her interrogation. However, each attacker claimed the other was the main person responsible for planning the home invasion. Joshua also accused William of being responsible for the murders. In his diary, Joshua referred to William as a coward, stating that William had the opportunity to save his family but chose not to. The trial of Hayes started on September 13, 2010, with a jury of 12 people, consisting of 7 women and 5 men. The defense team argued that Joshua was the mastermind behind the crime and was responsible for making it more brutal. On the other hand, the prosecutors believed that both Hayes and Joshua were equally responsible. After about 5 hours of discussion, the jury found Hayes guilty on October 5. The sentencing phase began on October 18, but the jury was initially torn between recommending life imprisonment or the death penalty. Hayes' defense team argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. However, on November 8, the jury decided to recommend the death sentence for Hayes. Before the trial, Hayes had tried to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but the prosecutors wanted the death penalty. On December 2, 2010, Hayes apologized for the pain he caused the Petit family. He stated that death would be a welcome relief and hoped it would bring some peace to those he hurt. Judge John Blues sentenced Hayes to 6 death sentences and 106 additional years for other crimes. However, when Connecticut abolished capital punishment in 2015, Hayes' death sentence was changed to life imprisonment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. They argued that Hayes was the one who directed Joshua. Joshua was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During Joshua's sentencing, he expressed remorse and shame for the crime, claiming he never intended to kill anyone. The judge set an execution date of July 20, 2012, holding Joshua accountable for his actions. However, in August 2015, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment after Connecticut abolished capital punishment. William Petit, the lone survivor of his family, was released from the hospital after 4 days. Upon his discharge, he immediately attended the funeral service for his wife and daughters. Overwhelmed with guilt and grief, William struggled to come to terms with the devastating reality that his loved ones were truly gone forever. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan grew up in Canada, in a large family with his parents, Bill and Susan. Bill works at the Toronto Star Daily newspaper and spends time on his many interests, including sports, yoga, and psychology, which help balance family life. In addition, his wife, Susan, is able to manage the household, take care of the children, and keep their Toronto home clean. Passers-by often stop to admire the family's beautiful and blooming garden. Although Susan loved her sons equally, but Brett seemed to be less criticized because he was generally well-behaved. Brett was very clever at getting out of difficult situations, which gave the impression that he was a good boy, although this was not always the case. Brett was extremely popular in school, with everyone wanting to be his friend or at least be able to greet him by name, just like his older brothers. After high school, Brett attended university, driven by a desire to surpass his brother's achievements. To earn extra money, he placed an ad in the local newspaper, offering to paint houses and fences for Toronto residents. At first, his business was quite successful and Brett felt proud, especially with his first income. His mother, Susan, was thrilled and often cited him as a role model for others. However, things took a turn when Brett dropped out of college to focus full-time on his paint business. Without a degree, he had to work full-time as a paint salesman, which deprived him of formal education and exposed him to paint fumes on a regular basis. For a while, Brett felt confident and superior to his brothers, but this soon changed. After a couple of years, his brothers, Christopher and Leland, graduated and landed jobs in their specialized fields. Christopher worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland became the family artist and designer. As they established their careers and moved out of their parents' home, Brett's power began to diminish significantly. To save money on rent, Brett continued to live with his parents and younger brother, who attended a school for gifted children. Brett's financial situation grew more dire over time. By 2007, when he turned 26, his debt had surged to more than $60,000. This burden led to depression, but despite his inner turmoil, Brett maintained a cheerful exterior, always willing to lend a helping hand and participate in volunteer work. His friends and acquaintances were unaware of the immense emotional pain he was hiding. Brett faced a severe situation on October 28, 2007. With winter approaching, he had no orders. Left with no other choice, Brett wore his oldest clothes, including a hat, a long sweater his brother had given him and a long scarf his mother had knitted. It was the first time he had worn the scarf, but it was finally coming in handy. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank that was on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Brett stood in line at the bank, holding a thick folder and favoring his right foot as he waited his turn. When the bank employee called him forward, he approached her and spoke in a hushed tone. He calmly informed her that he had a gun and urged her to remove all the cash from the register and hand it over to him. He warned her that if she didn't comply, he would start shooting, and she would be the first person he would harm. She, with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett quietly exited the building, careful not to draw the attention of the guardians. Once outside, Brett took off running. He counted the money he had stolen from the bank, but it wasn't much, just over $1,000. To pay off his debt, he calculated that he would need to rob about 60 more banks, a crazy idea, but to him it seemed like the only option. For the first few days, Brett was fearful that the police would somehow catch up with him, so he avoided going home. He told his mother he had a job in a neighboring town and spent his nights sleeping in his car. Periodically, Brett would sneak back to his house to check if there were any police cars staking out the area. Finding none, he felt reassured that he was in the clear. The first robbery was followed by a second, then a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett changed his clothes, opting for second-hand or discarded items he found in the trash. He would burn the used clothes after each crime. Brett also bought a beard from a costume party store to further disguise himself. Brett committed a string of bank robberies in the Toronto area, and his distinctive beard made a lasting impression on the witnesses. His total intended theft across all instances never exceeded $3,000. Brett's luck ran out when police spotted his car on surveillance cameras and followed him home. They tracked his exact route, gathering details from various vehicles to prove his guilt. Further inquiries yielded little new information, so the authorities closely tracked a particular road in an attempt to shed light on the case. Their patience and hard work finally paid off. They found a potential lead. This person of interest, a bearded man, was found walking alone near a bank and was promptly detained by the officer for further investigation. Brett was under investigation for 7 months before being charged with robbery with a firearm, despite having a gun permit. Notably, he never actually carried a gun or any other weapon during the robberies. He didn't even bring a kitchen knife. Initially, he was charged with 19 counts, but after multiple appeals filed by him and his family, only 8 of those counts were upheld. Upon being given the opportunity to apply for parole, Brett submitted a petition. In it, he asked the authorities to consider the circumstances that led him to commit the crimes, including severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and a significant amount of debt. He also reiterated that he had never intended to harm anyone during the robberies, as evidenced by his lack of weapons. His remarks were taken into account, but as a condition of his potential parole, he was required to undergo a session with a psychologist. The sessions had a positive impact on Brett. During his time in prison, he had lost touch with his family, but he took the initiative to reconnect with them. The positive changes in Brett were noticed by the commissioners, and on November 24, 2010, he was released from prison. However, the freedom he had fought so hard for turned out to be more challenging than he had anticipated. Prior to his career as a painter, Brett struggled with deep emotional pain that weighed heavily on him. He had previously been a bank robber and served time in prison, which damaged his reputation. As a result, no company would hire him, and even those who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they discovered his true identity. The neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and visited frequently, now spread unpleasant rumors about the family. The Brett family quickly sold their house and relocated to Scarborough. Susan started a new garden, and Brett found a job with a trading company. Although the pay was low, his parents helped him financially to rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a strong connection with his family. Brett's life took a turn for the better when he met Kristen Baxter in September 2011. Kristen was an amazing person who had her own apartment with a stunning sea view. She was also into sports, which helped her stay in shape. What Brett appreciated most about her was that she didn't care about his past. They enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son in a happy relationship and were confident that Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential. However, just when everything was going well, tragedy struck. Brett's father passed away, leaving him in shock and sending him into a depressive state. As a result, Brett started visiting his psychologist more frequently to cope with his emotions. Brett was juggling two responsibilities: supporting his mother financially and nurturing his relationship with Kristen. They were both young adults, eager to build a stronger and more significant relationship with each other. Brett fell deeply in love with Kristen and decided to carry out an important plan. He had some savings and, after discussing his plans with his mother, decided to propose to Kristen with a ring. His mother supported his decision and gave him money to buy a ring. Although Kristen didn't need an expensive gift, Brett chose a gold ring with a large diamond to make the proposal special. Kristen happily accepted his proposal. As they began planning their wedding, Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was worried about the high costs and how they would affect his job. Brett found a job opening at a large technology company on the internet and applied for it. He updated his resume and submitted it, and was even invited for an interview, which he successfully passed. As a result, he was offered the job and was thrilled. He eagerly shared the news with his fiancée and mother, and asked them for money to buy an expensive suit for work. His mother agreed to help him, and he purchased the suit. However, just as Brett was about to start his new job, the company called him to inform him that they had to withdraw their offer. The security department had discovered his past criminal record, and the company could no longer hire him. This news was devastating for Brett, and his mood plummeted. He felt like giving up on his job search and education, wondering why he was wasting his time applying for jobs that he would never get due to his past mistakes. He decided that it would be better to use the money his mother and brothers had given him for something else. Brett had dropped out of university, but he didn't tell his family or his counselor. To maintain the illusion of success, Brett would wear a suit and tie, then change into casual clothes on the way to his job as a house painter. He would tell his relatives that he worked in an office. To further deceive his loved ones, Brett would post fake photos on social media, pretending to be at work or attending business events. He would also fake phone calls, making it seem like he was busy with work-related issues. Brett's family had no idea that he was hiding the truth about his life. As Brett's wedding to Kristen approached in September 2016, his deception reached new heights. He rented an expensive restaurant for the reception, which cost $100 per guest. His family was thrilled, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around with a prestigious job and a beautiful fiancée. However, Brett's deceptions became so overwhelming that he could no longer control his lies. Brett's wedding was just a month away, and he was struggling to cover the costs. He had been borrowing money from his mother, but when she could no longer help him, he pressured her to find a higher-paying job. Meanwhile, he was planning a bachelor party and had invited all his friends and brothers. Brett had a secret. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer for a technology company. When he finally confessed to his counselor, the counselor advised him to come clean to his mother. After much procrastination, Brett told his mother the truth, which devastated her. She bragged to everyone about her son's success. Brett's mother demanded that he tell his fiancée, Kristen, the truth, threatening to do so herself if he didn't. She also warned him that his brothers were aware of the situation and were on her side. However, Brett couldn't bring himself to confess to Kristen, despite knowing that the wedding was unlikely to happen due to his deception. With less than a month to go before the wedding, Brett remained silent, knowing that Kristen deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Brett was anxious about his mother revealing a potentially scandalous secret to his fiancée, Kristen. Every time her phone rang, he would tense up, holding his breath until he realized it wasn't his mother on the line, but rather one of Kristen's friends inquiring about her wedding plans. Eventually, Brett came up with a plan to silence his mother for good. As a convicted felon, Brett was prohibited from owning firearms. He decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon, to carry out his plan. Interestingly, his late father had taught him how to shoot a crossbow at targets in their garden, a hobby that Brett had excelled at. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows at a local sporting goods store and hid them in his garage, disguising them among construction debris. He also created a fake alibi by rigging his computer to automatically post pre-written comments on YouTube. He achieved this by attaching a spoon to a fan, which was connected to his computer. The fan was set to a timer, making it seem like Brett was actively using his computer at the time of the crime. Brett made everyone believe that he spent the whole day at home, watching videos and commenting on them. However, on the morning of August 25th, he had other plans. He put on disguising clothes that concealed his face, sneaked out of the house through the back door to avoid the security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. He wants to eliminate anyone who might stand in the way of the peaceful life he and Kristen are building. When Brett arrived at his parents' house, his mother, Susan, was taken aback by his unexpected visit. She wasn't feeling well that day, but Brett persisted in persuading her not to reveal his plans to his future wife. Despite her poor health, Susan firmly refused to comply with Brett's demands. As he continued to pressure her, Brett's anger escalated, and Susan sensed that something was terribly wrong. She noticed the crazed look in her son's eyes and warned him that she had already called for help and that Christopher was on his way. Brett's anger reached a boiling point. He rushed to the garage, grabbed a crossbow, but his rage and adrenaline surge made him unable to aim properly. Instead, he used the crossbow's butt to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he tightened a rope around her neck. After covering her body with plastic bags, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows, ready to face whoever was coming next. Brett's brother Christopher was lured into a trap by the suspect. As he entered the garage or the yard, Brett, who was hiding in the bushes, ambushed and shot Christopher in the neck. Christopher died shortly after the attack. Alexander, the youngest brother, was the next target. The suspect had also managed to lure him, but Alexander's outcome was different. Shot in the neck with an arrow, Alexander was critically injured but didn't die instantly. He screamed and cried for help as the attack took place. Throughout this violence, Leland remained asleep on the second floor, oblivious to the crime happening nearby and to the identity of the perpetrator, who was also a family member. It was Alexander's screams that startled Leland out of sleep, ran downstairs, and stumbled upon the horrific scene of his brother Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett, and Leland ended up in control, forcing Brett to back down. Leland immediately fled to a neighbor's house and called the police. With no means of escape, Brett remained in the house, realizing too late that his actions had disastrous consequences. In a desperate attempt to make amends, he composed a text message to Kristen, pleading for her forgiveness. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers found Brett, covered in blood, sitting beside his critically injured brother Alexander, who would later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. Brett voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, requesting to be handcuffed and taken into custody. During his confession, he revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden beneath packages in the garage, and acknowledged that she was beyond help. Brett admitted at the police station during the trial that he had not intended to kill Susan, but rather to scare her. In contrast, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, who were witnesses to the crime. If they had not been present, they would still be alive. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his struggles with depression, but this did not lead to a more lenient sentence. Despite Brett's cooperation with the investigation and his voluntary confession, the judge imposed 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Brett will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the incident, has refused to speak to reporters, but he is well known in Toronto as the one who narrowly escaped the carnage. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family soon after her birth, and her mother, Shannon, moved back in with grandparents. When Kirsten was 2 years old, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon remarried, but the marriage was short-lived, leaving Shannon to care for her 2 young daughters alone. Kirsten, being the older sibling, took on a lot of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger sister, Faith. Kirsten and Faith shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the adjacent room. On May 13, 1997, Shannon put her daughters to bed as usual. Kirsten was 8 years old, and Faith was 3. However, Faith had already fallen asleep, so Shannon only said goodnight to Kirsten and left the door to their room slightly open, as she always did, in case Kirsten or Faith needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon was awoken by a noise coming from the girls' room. Thinking one of her daughters was awake, Shannon got out of bed to check on them. As she approached the door, the noise stopped. Assuming her daughters had gone back to sleep, Shannon was about to return to her room when she noticed that the door to their room was now completely closed. This was unusual, as she was certain she had left it slightly open. She wondered if one of them had closed the door or if she had simply forgotten to leave it open. Shannon opened the door slightly to check, but she didn't enter the room before returning to bed. Shannon went to wake up her daughters at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but only found Faith in their bedroom. Shannon asked Faith where Kirsten was, and when Faith said she didn't know, Shannon began a thorough search of the house. However, Kirsten was nowhere to be found. Shannon then checked outside the house and contacted the parents of Kirsten's friends to see if she had come to their house. But no one had seen her. Shannon's search efforts led her to call her father, who lived nearby, to see if Kirsten had gone to his house or not. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen her either. At this point, Shannon realized Kirsten was missing, and her father advised her to call the police. When the police arrived, they initially thought Kirsten might be hiding in the house or had simply wandered off for a walk, given the town's low crime rate. However, upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. This raised their suspicions that something more serious had occurred. Further investigation led them to discover a piece of children's underwear stained with blood on the ground outside the window. After confirming with Shannon that the underwear belonged to Kirsten, the police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping. More officers were called to the scene to assist with the investigation, which marked the beginning of a more extensive search for Kirsten. The police investigation into Kirsten's disappearance began with a search of the area around the house. During this search, the police spoke with Kirsten's mother, who reported hearing a noise at 3 a.m. and now realized that it may have been the sound of her daughter being taken. Despite the search, nothing suspicious was found, and the police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with all the residents. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of the abduction. However, one neighbor did mention being woken up by a barking dog around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. With no solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to interview Faith, who was only 3 years old. Despite her young age, Faith was able to share what she had witnessed, but her statement was limited to a single phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but unfortunately, it did not provide any further information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother, Shannon, had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. The investigation into Kirsten's disappearance continued, with detectives initially speaking to Shannon, her mother. Shannon denied any involvement, claiming to have been clean from substance abuse for some time and insisting she would never harm her daughter. Although detectives were not convinced of Shannon's innocence, they could not find any evidence to prove her involvement. The police then turned to the public for help, using the media to ask for any information that might be relevant to the case. In response, they received hundreds of calls, but most of the calls were fruitless. However, one clue provided a promising lead. A woman reported her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, including aggressive outbursts and a disturbing threat he made during an argument. The police investigated the man and discovered that he knew Shannon's brother, which meant Kirsten might have known him too. Additionally, the man had a history of drug use and assault, and he had previously been familiar with the Hatfield family home. Despite this, the investigation ultimately found that the man had a solid alibi for the time Kirsten went missing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he was at a bar until around 4 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, making it impossible for him to have abducted Kirsten. Detectives pursued multiple leads, but each one led to a dead end. As time passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive began to fade. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, refused to give up. She took matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media outlets, distributed flyers, and even investigated potential suspects on her own. However, Shannon faced numerous obstacles. Many local businesses refused to display Kirsten's flyers, citing company policies. She also attempted to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon established a volunteer center to help find Kirsten. The center focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon encountered new challenges. Some volunteers stole money, lied about their work, and used the media to gain attention for themselves. Despite these setbacks, Shannon persevered in her search for the truth. After years of effort, Shannon realized that her approach was not yielding results. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon's goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect others from potentially dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. Shannon suspected Kirsten's kidnapper had a history of violent crimes. To pursue this lead, she researched people with violent pasts in her area but found no connection to Kirsten's disappearance. Despite her efforts, she eventually had to accept that Kirsten might have passed away and might not return. Still, Shannon continued to search for answers. Periodically, police reopened the case to investigate new leads, working with the FBI to create an updated sketch of Kirsten's possible appearance. In 2014, there was a breakthrough in the Kirsten case. A woman contacted the police and shared a shocking discovery she had made while sorting through her late mother's belongings. Among her mother's possessions was a diary detailing the woman's father's confession, claiming he had killed Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was extremely detailed, and detectives were convinced of its accuracy. According to the diary, the man had kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a house he owned in a nearby town, and murdered her after horribly torturing her. The description of the crime process spanned many pages, leaving even veteran investigators confused. The diary also revealed that the crime had been recorded on a videotape. Investigators immediately questioned the woman's father. However, his reaction was surprising. While he denied any involvement in the Kirsten case, he asserted that he had known who was responsible for Kirsten's death, saying the murder had occurred at his ex-girlfriend's house. The police were confused and asked for the house address. They quickly received a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly search this house. The forensic investigation began with a crucial step: the use of luminol, a substance that glows when exposed to very small amounts of blood. When the forensic team applied luminol to the scene, they were surprised by the results. An expert later described the house as lit up like a Christmas tree due to the numerous bloodstains. The bloodstains matched the details of the murder described in the diary, leading the team to believe they had finally found concrete evidence. To investigate further, police removed the floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent these items to a laboratory for analysis. They also organized an excavation team in the hope of finding the victim's body. In addition, the police also discovered a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, so they had to review the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might have contained footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, but after hours of analysis, none of the tapes were related to the murder. Excavations also proved fruitless, with no remains or evidence found in the soil. However, just when the investigation seemed to have been gaining momentum, the police encountered an unexpected and shocking episode. Experts who analyzed the bloodstains in the house concluded that the bloodstains had actually belonged to an animal, not a human. This revelation left the police stunned and wondering what had just happened. Had someone deliberately deceived them with a cruel joke? Or was the person writing the diary struggling with mental health issues and convinced by a false narrative that had developed in their mind? The truth was still unknown. Detectives had run out of leads in Kirsten's case, and the case was once again stalled. In an effort to revive the investigation, the case was reassigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller in the summer of 2015. Miller decided to start from scratch and review all existing documents and records. During his scrutiny, Miller discovered something surprising. His predecessors had overlooked some key evidence, including blood found on Kirsten's windowsill and on her underwear. The evidence had been stored in a warehouse, but shockingly had never been sent to a laboratory for analysis. Miller suspected that the reason for this might have been because police initially thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, which would not have yielded any useful results. However, Miller decided to send them to the laboratory for analysis. The results were surprising. The blood sample did not belong to Kirsten, but to an unidentified man. This was a significant breakthrough after many years of investigation. Miller decided to collect DNA samples from all the men who had participated in the investigation since the kidnapping. Police tracked down each person on the list and sent their DNA to a lab for analysis. Everyone was cooperative and provided their DNA samples quickly. Miller patiently waited for the results, and finally he received a call from the lab. Experts had analyzed one of the samples and found a perfect match with bloodstains found on the window and the victim's underwear. The DNA belonged to Anthony Palma, 56. The Hatfield family's neighbor who lived across the street. Anthony had been one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. At the time, he claimed to have woken up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now that his DNA had been linked to the crime scene, detectives decided to bring him in for further questioning. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient for a conviction, the investigators hoped to obtain a confession from Anthony. A confession would expedite the trial and potentially lead them to Kirsten's body, which was still missing. To get Anthony to talk, the detectives invited him for questioning, telling him it was a routine process. They claimed they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, to gather new information. In reality, their goal was to get Anthony to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Detectives asked Anthony to recall any additional details about the night in question. He retold the same story he had shared 18 years earlier. But this time he added a new detail. He claimed to have seen a white car parked outside Kirsten's house, although he didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked Anthony about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. He stated that he knew them as neighbors, but he had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He maintained that he got along well with the other neighborhood children, who would often ask him for help fixing their bikes or visit him for candy. This conversation became a critical point in the investigation, as the police had discovered Anthony's blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's bedroom. When they asked if he had ever entered the house, Anthony claimed he had not. This statement raised suspicions, as the presence of his blood suggested otherwise. The detectives faced a challenge. Anthony's blood was fresh, suggesting it had been left recently, but he had had a visitor to the house when it belonged to a friend. The investigators decided to move forward with the interrogation. Informing Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony repeatedly denied ever entering the house, despite the evidence to the contrary. The investigators attempted to extract a confession, but he consistently maintained his innocence. The detectives changed their approach and exited the room, leaving Detective Miller to speak with Anthony privately. Miller entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it in front of Anthony. However, Anthony promptly pushed the photo away, refusing to look at it for the remainder of the conversation. Miller asked various questions, attempting to prompt Anthony into a confession, but he continued to deny any involvement. Failing to obtain an admission of guilt, the police ended the interrogation and apprehended Anthony. A subsequent search of his residence, made possible by a search warrant, uncovered no evidence of Kirsten's remains or any other relevant evidence. During the trial, Anthony repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime. But DNA evidence told a different story. As the trial progressed, new details emerged that the police had initially overlooked. It was revealed that Anthony had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior conviction for breaking into a girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a violent attack involving a weapon. Anthony's past convictions signaled his dangerousness, yet were overlooked in 1997. In 2017, a jury returned a guilty verdict for Kirsten's kidnapping and Kirsten's murder, and Anthony was sentenced to life in prison. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony never disclosed the location of Kirsten's body. Kirsten's mother refused to give up hope, however. She consistently reached out to Anthony, calling and visiting him in prison, in an effort to find out where Kirsten's body was. She spent hours trying to extract the truth from him, but ultimately, she was unsuccessful. Tragically, in 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who was motivated by a desire for revenge for Anthony's horrific crime against a child. As a result, Kirsten's family's only hope of finding Kirsten's body now depends on hikers or tourists who might stumble upon it in remote national parks, where Anthony may have buried her. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson was born to Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. She majored in political science at the University of South Carolina. She plans to attend Drexel University School of Law with the goal of specializing in international law. Samantha received a full scholarship to Drexel University and a partial scholarship to Rutgers University, and hopes to pursue a career in international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority and had the opportunity to study abroad in Barcelona. While in South Carolina, she also visited Madrid and Paris. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg. Samantha and Greg communicated regularly through text messages and phone calls every day whenever possible. Even though Samantha was about to enter law school, they still planned to build a future together. Greg planned to move in with her and support her. However, everything changed on Friday, March 29, 2019, when Samantha did not return to her apartment. On March 28, 2019, Samantha decided to hang out with her roommate and friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Although her boyfriend, Greg, was unable to come along, the group visited several bars before ending up at the Bird Dog Bar in Five Points, a popular place for students to socialize. Samantha was hanging out with friends, but she kept texting her boyfriend, Greg. She wanted him to drive to Columbia to be with her. However, they had plans to meet up the following weekend, so Greg decided not to go to Columbia with her. He kept in regular contact with Samantha. Around 2 a.m., Samantha left and returned to her apartment alone. She called an Uber to get home. Samantha was waiting for an Uber. While waiting, she talked to Greg on the phone at around 2:04 a.m. and told him she was on her way home. She had used Uber many times before to get to and from bars. Shortly after requesting a ride, a car pulled up at the curb where Samantha walked up to the car, realized it wasn't hers, and then turned around to return to her spot on the sidewalk. She was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in front of Samantha. She said goodbye to Greg, assuming the Impala was her ride. She opened the door, exchanged a quick word with the driver, and got into the back seat. The car sped off immediately. Meanwhile, the actual Uber she had ordered arrived at the pickup location, but the driver couldn't find Samantha and eventually canceled the request and left. The black Chevrolet Impala circled the area several times before targeting Samantha. This behavior suggests that the driver was aware of the college students who congregated on 5 Point streets after the bars closed, waiting for the car to leave. Meanwhile, Samantha's boyfriend, Greg, had been tracking her movements using the Find My Friends app to make sure she got home safely. He noticed that she was moving in the opposite direction of her apartment, which initially did not raise any concerns because he thought she might be visiting a friend. However, when he texted her to check in, he received no response. Greg tried calling Samantha, but she didn't answer. He sent her multiple texts, but they showed up as delivered, not read. This meant Samantha wasn't reading his messages. Her phone's location stopped sharing, which surprised Greg because it had never happened before. He thought maybe she had left her phone in the Uber. Concerned, Greg contacted her friends and roommate to see if they had heard from her or if she had made it home safely. However, no one had any news about her whereabouts. Greg decided to rest, hoping Samantha would show up tomorrow morning. The next morning, Samantha was missing. Her roommates filed a missing person report. Her boyfriend, Greg, drove 2 hours to Columbia to help search for her. Shortly after the report was filed, a group of turkey hunters found the body of a young woman in a wooded area in New Zion, about 65 miles from 5 Points. The hunters immediately called 911 after the discovery, and the local sheriff's office quickly dispatched deputies to the scene. The body was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson. An autopsy revealed that Samantha's body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, affecting multiple areas, including her face, head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet. In an attempt to defend herself, her fingernails were severely damaged as she tried to evade a sharp object. Evidence suggested a double-edged knife had been used, and she had then been dragged into the woods. An autopsy revealed that her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Samantha had suffered severe blood loss. Police quickly obtained surveillance footage from the bar the night of the incident, which showed Samantha getting into a black Chevrolet Impala. The footage showed the car circling the block several times. Police discovered that Samantha had accidentally gotten into the killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha had called arrived a short time later. However, when the driver realized that Samantha was not there, he canceled the ride and left. Police believe that the suspect may have used a childproof lock to lock her inside, as when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of the car, so Samantha would not have been able to get out at that point. A description of the vehicle was released to the public in hopes of identifying the perpetrator, and shortly after, police spotted a black Chevrolet Impala during a 3 a.m. patrol on March 30th, while patrolling the area where Samantha was abducted. When the police stopped the car, the driver immediately jumped out and started running. After a short chase, he was arrested. When police checked his ID, they discovered that the man arrested was Nathaniel Rowland, 24, of New Zion. During a search of the vehicle, patrol officers discovered a child car seat in the back, surrounded by blood stains. This discovery prompted them to call for backup. As police suspected it was a crime scene, homicide detectives were called to investigate and conducted a thorough search of the vehicle. They discovered multiple blood stains on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was found on the floor of the car. Police later discovered that Nathaniel had tried to sell it to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he had refused their offer of $125 and left the phone in the car. Police also found that the child locks were activated, which Nathaniel had used to lock Samantha inside. Several cleaning products, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes, were found in the car. Nathaniel had cleaned his car, but there was still a trace of blood in the car. During questioning, Nathaniel repeatedly denied any involvement in the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. He maintained his innocence. Police searching Nathaniel's body discovered traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. However, no DNA from Nathaniel was found on Samantha's body. Police pieced together the evidence and speculated that Samantha was the victim of a sudden and violent attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still active at the time of Nathaniel's arrest led them to conclude that he must have activated the feature as soon as Samantha got into the car. Nathaniel suddenly stabbed her multiple times with a double-edged knife. Taken by surprise by the brutality of the attack, she struggled to fend off the blows, which explains the multiple stab wounds to her hands and the severe damage to her fingernails. Samantha was attacked by Nathaniel, who scratched Nathaniel's hand, leaving skin cells under her fingernails as evidence. After the attack, Nathaniel drove to a remote road in New Zion and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. Upon returning home, Nathaniel posted on social media, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Nathaniel's neighborhood is minutes away from where Samantha's body was found. A background check on Nathaniel showed that he attended South Carolina State University in 2017. However, there is no record of him graduating and it is unclear what job he was doing at the time of the incident. Nathaniel was previously arrested for assaulting and robbing a woman in October 2018. Police searched Nathaniel's girlfriend, Maria Howard's apartment in New Zion, where he was living. They found evidence in a trash can behind the apartment, including a sock and towel with blood stains on it, which belonged to Nathaniel. The blood was later determined to be Samantha's. Police also discovered a blood-stained white cloth, duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a double-edged knife with obvious blood stains. Tests later confirmed that blood found on the double-edged knife, bed sheets, car, and bleach wipes matched Samantha Josephson. Nathany was charged with kidnapping and murder. The trial took place. Nathany maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence against him. In the summer of 2021, Nathany's defense team argued that he was innocent, as there was no DNA of his on Samantha. Prosecutors countered Nathaniel's claim of innocence with a large amount of evidence gathered in the case. Key evidence included CCTV footage showing Nathaniel's car picking up Samantha in 5 points and driving away, as well as several incriminating physical pieces of evidence found in his car. Additionally, cell phone tracking showed that Nathaniel and Samantha's phones were in the same location at the time of the murder. Furthermore, Nathaniel lived near where Samantha's body was discovered. The prosecution presented 31 witnesses, including a person who saw Nathaniel cleaning the murder weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and Nathaniel's ex-girlfriend, who claimed that her daughter had blood on her shoes after being in Nathaniel's car. After the murder, Nathaniel did not contact any witnesses to testify in his favor, and no members of Nathaniel's family came forward to defend him. Despite this, Nathaniel maintained his innocence and appealed to the judge. The jury deliberated for only an hour before returning a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel was subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have 2 children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles. particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation, Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Rena Verk. Rena Verk had been born on March 10, 1983, in Saanich, British Columbia, Canada. Her family was of Indian origin, with her mother, Suman, having come from an Indian-Canadian family, and her father, Manjit, being an immigrant from India. Rena's parents had formerly been Hindus and had converted to Jehovah's religion. Rena struggled to fit in with her peers in the Saanich community, where Sikhism was popular among Indo-Canadians. Unfortunately, she was severely bullied at school due to her appearance and ethnic background, which set her apart from her predominantly white classmates. She was bullied due to her unusual appearance, being overweight and having brown skin. At home, Rena faced strict rules tied to her parents' religious beliefs, which were in stark contrast to her friends, who were starting to become independent. Her parents began to worry when they discovered her persistent bullying and feared it could negatively affect her mental health, potentially leading to depression. In May 1994, Rena's family moved to a new location, resulting in her transferring schools from Burnside Primary School. Her parents hoped this action would put an end to the bullying she initially experienced, and it seemed to be effective. Rena's mood improved, and she formed new friendships that brought her happiness. However, things took a turn for the worse when her new friends began to distance themselves from her, and the bullying began again. Rena graduated from elementary school in 1996 and began attending Coquitz Middle School. There, she met a new group of friends whom she considered cool kids. The group was famous for breaking the rules, drinking, and smoking, which represented the freedom that Rena desired, freedom from the strictness of her parents and their rules. Although she felt accepted by her new friends, her parents disapproved of her new relationships, leading Rena to become more rebellious. In 1996, when Rena was 13 years old, a friend suggested she leave home. The friend told her she could be adopted by telling the police that her parents had physically abused her. Rena took this advice and accused her parents of assault, but no charges were brought due to lack of evidence. Rena was taken away from her family and lived with her grandparents, who believed her story. However, things got worse when Rena falsely accused her father of sexually assaulting her, causing him extreme pain and suffering. In 1997, her father was arrested and sent to prison while awaiting trial for sexually assaulting Rena. Luckily, the charges against her father were dropped when Rena admitted that she had made up the entire story. Rena felt uncomfortable living with her grandparents, so she was placed in a foster home. There, she made friends and began imitating the behavior of those around her, including talking about gangs and even falsely claiming to be a member of one. However, Rena soon realized that living in a foster home was not as fun as she thought because she still had to follow rules and curfews. Finally, she apologized to her parents and returned home. However, her time with her parents had ended very quickly. Rena had left her parents' house again and stayed in a youth shelter. Over the next few months, she had bounced between her parents' home, foster care, and the youth shelter. This volatile situation reflected the challenges she had faced as a teenager trying to cope with her relationships with her parents, social workers, and government officials. Rena had yearned for acceptance and friendship, but her strict upbringing and overprotective parents had made her feel like an outcast among her peers. She had desperately wanted to fit in and had tried her best to gain their approval. Middle school had been the most confusing and emotionally challenging time of her life. Rena had sought recognition from those who had previously rejected her. Until she had received an invitation to a party on November 14, 1997, she had been delighted at the opportunity to interact with the popular kids. Rena's life had taken a turn during an overnight gathering with celebrities, which had initially taken place behind a school in Saanich. However, due to police intervention, the group had moved to Craigflower Bridge. The gathering had not gone as Rena had planned. At 10:40 p.m., just 20 minutes before curfew, Rena had called her parents to say she was coming home. Unfortunately, this would be the last time Rena's parents would hear from her. At Craigflower Bridge, a group of teenagers had drunk alcohol and smoked marijuana. Later, another group of girls from the Shoreline 6 gang had targeted Rena without warning. They had assaulted her, burned her forehead with a lit cigarette, and tried to burn her hair. The attack had continued until a girl had intervened and ordered the others to stop. Rena had tried to escape and go home after the initial attack, but two teenagers, Kelly and Warren, had chased her. They had dragged Rena to the other side of the Craigflower Bridge, where the attack on her had continued. Kelly and Warren had punched and kicked her, then held her head underwater until she died. After Rena's death, the attackers had taken off her sweater and shoes and rolled her body into the water. Meanwhile, Rena's parents had become increasingly worried when she did not return home before curfew. They had initially thought she might be at her grandparents' house or a group home, but she had not been at either location. A friend had revealed that Rena was still at the party when the friend had left around 11 p.m. The next day, Rena's family had reported her missing, but the police had responded slowly due to her past history of running away. Rumors had spread among students at the local middle school about a brutal beating and a body found in the nearby Gorge waterway. The group of teens involved, known as the Shoreline 6, had remained silent about the incident. However, a witness had eventually come forward to police, saying she had seen Kelly and Warren following Rena after the beating. It had taken a week for police to begin investigating Rena's disappearance after her family had reported her missing. Although many witnesses and teachers had heard rumors about the incident, no one had reported it to the police. It wasn't until a student had come forward as a witness that the police got involved. On November 21, 1997, Warren and Kelly had been arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault. The members of the Shoreline Six had initially remained anonymous due to protection under Canada's Young Offenders Act, and they had faced serious assault charges. A police helicopter had been dispatched to the Craigflower Bridge area on November 22, but no evidence had been discovered until a thorough search had been conducted on the ground. This search had eventually discovered a body hidden in the weeds, later confirmed to be the missing person, Rena Verk. The forensic pathologist had concluded that Rena's death was due to drowning. However, an autopsy had shown that she had also suffered severe head injuries, which could have led to death. Rena had been only 14 years old when she had passed away. The 6 girls involved in the attack on Rena had initially been charged at the youth court in February 1998. To protect their identities, their names were not being made public. 3 of the girls had pleaded guilty to assault causing bodily harm, while the remaining 3 had been found guilty of the same offense after a trial. They had received sentences ranging from 60 days of conditional release to 1 year in prison. Rena's murder had led to the prosecution of 2 individuals, Kelly and Warren, who had been charged with her murder. Due to the severity of the crime, they had been tried in adult court despite being underage. Warren Glowatsky had had a difficult childhood. His mother had been absent for much of his life due to her struggles with alcoholism. At the time of Rena's murder, he had been living with a friend after his father had moved to California without him. Warren's trial had begun in April 1999, and he had been convicted of second-degree murder in June of the same year. As a result, he had received a life sentence. Warren had been eligible for parole after serving 7 years in prison because he had been a juvenile when the crime had occurred. During his time in prison, Warren had done things that could have had a positive impact on his decision to be paroled. This process had included measures such as meeting with Rena's family. In July 2006, Warren had been paroled from prison unescorted, and he had been finally fully released in June 2010. Rena's family had not opposed Warren's request for parole because they had believed he had shown genuine remorse for his actions. In contrast, Kelly Ard had come from a more stable family, one that had always supported her throughout the trial. She had been 15 years old when Rena had been murdered. Although her lawyer had requested that her case be heard in youth court, the Supreme Court of Canada had denied the request due to the violent nature of the crime and Kelly's apparent lack of remorse. Kelly had initially been convicted of second-degree murder in March 2000, but her conviction had been overturned in January 2003 due to an unfair trial. Pending appeal, Kelly had been released on bail after serving 18 months of her life sentence. However, during this time, she had been charged with assault causing bodily harm for attacking a 58-year-old woman in a Vancouver park. As a result, her bail had been revoked and she had been sent back to prison. In March 2004, Kelly had faced a new trial. Witnesses had testified that she had bragged about being responsible for Rena's death. Warren had claimed that he had seen Kelly drown Rena, but Kelly's lawyer had questioned Warren's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in his initial statements to police and during the trial. Kelly Ard had testified during the trial that she had assaulted Rena to protect her friends because she had believed Rena would harm them. However, she had denied responsibility for Rena's death and instead had pointed to Warren and 2 other girls as the culprits. Despite the evidence, Kelly had shown no remorse and had offered no clear motive for the planned attack. When asked about her future, Kelly had appeared resigned, admitting that her life had been ruined and that she would likely be convicted. The jury had deliberated for 5 days before deadlocking, leading to a mistrial in July 2004. In February 2005, Kelly's second trial had taken place, with Warren again testifying as a key witness. He had repeated his earlier testimony, saying that he and Kelly had assaulted Rena, leaving her dead in the water. As a result, Kelly had been convicted of second-degree murder on April 12, 2005, and had received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole for 7 years. However, the British Columbia Court of Appeal had later overturned Kelly's conviction in September 2008. The court had ordered a retrial, citing the incorrect jury conviction in the previous trial. The decision had led to a fourth trial, allowing Kelly's case to be reconsidered in court. The Supreme Court of Canada had upheld Kelly's conviction for second-degree murder in June 2009, ending lengthy court proceedings. Years later, in 2017, Kelly was granted day parole, and in 2019, she received additional privileges, including overnight leave and extended day parole. The Parole Board of Canada's decision to continue her parole in July 2020 had attracted significant media attention. Kelly, who had initially received the life sentence, rebuilt her life on parole. She changed her name to Carrie Sim, got married, and had 2 children. She complied with the conditions of her parole, which included abstaining from the use of stimulants and avoiding contact with Rena's family. Despite the passage of time, the motives behind the teen's decision to attack and ultimately kill Rena remained unclear. One reason might have been revenge, as Rena had previously lived with the 2 girls involved in the assault. They had accused her of stealing phone books and spreading false rumors. Another girl claimed to have had a grudge against Rena for allegedly stealing her boyfriend in 2000. Rena's parents had sued the teens involved in her death, as had the British Columbia government and other parties. Rena's father explained that he wanted people to take responsibility for their actions, saying that society often failed to do so. Years later, in 2012, Rena's mother spoke out about her daughter's tragic death and the devastating effects of bullying on young people. She shared that dealing with the legal consequences of Rena's murder had left her deeply saddened. As the court cases progressed, she was finally fully feeling her loss. She was struggling more with her emotions and missed Rena even more. Rena's mother also expressed concern that bullying was becoming more severe and frequent rather than decreasing. She was shocked by the new ways young people were using technology, such as cyberbullying and texting, to harm their peers. These methods had not been available when Rena was killed, and her mother was devastated as the problem escalated. The murder of Rena Verk had led to a national debate about racism and bullying, especially among young girls. In the wake of Rena's death, Rena's parents took action to create positive change. They started anti-bullying campaigns and inclusion programs and worked with the government to implement anti-bullying measures in British Columbia schools. Rena's parents also shared their story with students, teachers, and law enforcement professionals to raise awareness about bullying. Their efforts paid off when the government introduced an anti-bullying program in schools across the province. In 2009, Rena's parents were recognized for their advocacy with the Anthony J. Hume Award of Excellence for their dedication to crime prevention and community safety. Rena Verk's life had been marked by hardships and challenges. Although she made some mistakes, it was understandable given the pressure to fit in. Despite Rena's mistakes and the false accusations against her family, her parents continued to love and support Rena unconditionally. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Nicole Peets. Nicole Peets was born on February 26, 1973 in King County, Washington. Nicole was the only child in her family and her parents divorced when she was in school. During her high school years, Nicole was an active, sociable, athletic girl who was well-liked by many people. She had many friends and enjoyed field trips to the countryside. After graduating from high school, Nicole studied public relations at Western Washington College. At the same time, Nicole was still actively involved in sports. Nicole took a coaching position at a local sports club. Nicole quickly gained the respect of her colleagues, and Nicole attracted many customers to her classes. After graduating from college, Nicole decided to continue her education to improve her management skills. She found a job at a large mobile communications company. Nicole's personality is friendly, sociable, and willing to help people, but few people know that inside she is suffering from a lot of pain and suffering. Nicole's teenage years were severely affected by alcoholism. The divorce of her parents was a huge shock to her fragile psyche. Her rebellious nature and bad friends influenced her, and she began drinking. All of this led to a serious alcoholism that lasted for many years and completely undermined Nicole's physical and mental health. At that time, Nicole's mother, Gail, worked as a flight attendant and was often away from home because of her busy work. Therefore, Gail did not realize the change in Nicole. Nicole lives with her elderly grandmother, who also did not realize that her granddaughter regularly drank alcohol. When the truth was revealed, alcoholism had caused severe damage to Nicole. To help Nicole, Gail, her mother, accompanied Nicole to support her. Gail accompanied Nicole to therapy and alcoholism meetings, helping Nicole open up and overcome her cravings. At that time, Nicole's mother Gail had remarried, and Gail's new husband, Robert, was supportive of his stepdaughter, loving Nicole like his own daughter and believing that Nicole could overcome her alcoholism. Nicole took treatment very seriously. She did not miss a single meeting and quickly overcame her addiction. However, alcohol caused many health problems for Nicole. She had serious problems with her pancreas that required surgery. In addition, her alcoholism at a young age had seriously affected her fertility, making it impossible for Nicole to have children. In the mid-1990s, when Nicole was recovering from her addiction and living sober again, Nicole met David. At the time, Nicole had just gotten a job at a sports club, and David was a regular at the club. David was a tall, handsome young man. David was immediately attracted to Nicole, an attractive trainer, and David began to show interest in her. David, who was 4 years younger than Nicole, soon developed a relationship that lasted almost 8 years, and it was not until 2002 that the couple decided to marry. David and Nicole had a simple wedding in Hawaii, inviting only their closest friends. After their marriage, the newlyweds bought their own house and began to settle down in the town of Linwood, Washington. Nicole was a friendly and outgoing young woman who quickly made friends and built good relationships with her neighbors. Nicole loved animals and had several dogs. Because she could not have children, Nicole devoted all her love to these pets. David and Nicole were a perfect couple. They often went for walks with their dogs and always had happy smiles on their faces. Nicole loved to cook, and she was a very good cook. Nicole often treated her husband to delicious meals cooked by herself. In 2006, just a few days before her 33rd birthday, Nicole mysteriously disappeared. That day, for the first time, she did not attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, where she was the leader and inspiration for the group. Nicole also did not come to work, making her colleagues even more worried. In the evening, her mother, Gail, felt very worried when she could not contact Nicole all day, which had never happened before. Gail called Nicole's husband, David, to find out what was going on. However, David could not contact Nicole either. David said that David and Nicole had argued a little the day before, so when he tried calling Nicole the next day and got no response, he thought that Nicole was still angry with him. David did not rush to find Nicole right away, but waited until the evening to ask for her forgiveness. However, Nicole still did not come home that night. Nicole's family tried to contact her by phone but received no response. They decided to go to the police to report the incident. However, the police did not immediately accept their report because Nicole was an adult and had only been missing for less than a day. It was not until the evening of the second day after Nicole went missing that the police began searching. When Nicole did not appear and her phone was unreachable, the police decided to start searching from where she was last seen, which was her and David's house. However, after investigating, the police did not find any clues or unusual signs that Nicole had been kidnapped or that something had happened to her in that house. And Nicole's car was also missing with her, suggesting that she may have left on her own and did not want to return. Her mother Gail and stepfather Robert did not wait for the police to wait the required time and began the search themselves. They appealed to all concerned through social media to help in the search and share any relevant information about Nicole's location. Nicole's father and mother also took the first flight to Linwood, where they began searching for Nicole themselves, handing out flyers with her photo and asking people who knew her. The police searched for Nicole and her car. They tried to determine the route the car had taken on the day Nicole went missing. But there were no clues. The next morning a man was jogging when he took a shortcut through an area that was very sparsely populated. As he passed through that area, he noticed something strange in the bushes. As he got closer, he realized it was the severely mutilated body of a naked woman. He immediately called the police and reported the incident. The police quickly arrived at the scene. At the scene was the body of a young woman without any clothes on. Based on the number of bruises and scratches, the victim had been brutally beaten. The cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation with bare hands. The police suspected that the body was Nicole Peets, who had been missing for several days. When Nicole's mother, Gail, went to the morgue to identify the body, Gail fainted when she saw the body, and her husband, Robert, was also very sad. As for Nicole's husband, David, he did not show any signs of grief. This made everyone around David feel a little suspicious of his reaction. The police continued to search for Nicole's car, hoping to find traces of the killer in the car. Information about the missing car was widely publicized in the media, along with a call for people to contact the police if they saw the car. Some time later, a gray Volkswagen Polo was found in a parking lot on the outskirts of town. The security guard there discovered the car when he realized that it had been left there for a long time. At the time, he did not know that the car was involved in this serious murder. The police took the car for inspection and examined it to look for evidence and clues to help track down the criminal. However, after the inspection, they found no traces, except for the fingerprints and DNA traces of Nicole and her husband David. Without finding any concrete evidence, the police returned the car to David. The truth is that Nicole was brutally murdered, but the motive for the crime remains unclear. In addition, the carjacking theory is unlikely, as the car was abandoned shortly after on the other side of town. Nicole Peets' case remains unsolved after nearly a year of investigation. There have been no new leads or leads in the search for the perpetrator. No one saw the suspect leave his car in the parking lot because it was not crowded and there were no surveillance cameras in the area. What is suspicious is that Nicole's case has been kept secret. Information about the investigation and new evidence has not been disclosed to the family. Nicole's relatives have not been fully updated, only receiving small details. Nicole's bank card was used at a gas station after she went missing. Although the police have collected images from the cameras, they have not yet disclosed the results of the investigation. When Nicole's case did not progress and the perpetrator was still at large, Nicole's parents decided to conduct an investigation themselves. They hired a private investigator to gather information, verify some suspicions, and offer a reward for anyone who could provide useful information. The reward was initially $10,000 and later increased to $35,000, but no new leads were found. David initially showed great interest in investigating Nicole's disappearance for the first 6 months. However, after that time, he began to distance himself and had little contact with his in-laws, and David eventually remarried and had children of his own. The news of David's remarriage and children of his own came as a huge shock to Nicole's mother, Gail, because Nicole was unable to have children and was often blamed by David. A grief-stricken Gail repeatedly hinted that the culprit might be her son-in-law. 6 years later, Nicole's case took an unexpected turn. David was arrested as the prime suspect in the case. David did not expect that he himself would be the focus of this investigation. Previously, David had changed his residence and lost contact with Nicole's family, so he thought that the case was over and no one was looking for him. However, David was very surprised when the police raided and arrested him. At that time, David even declared his innocence and was willing to take a lie detector test, but he failed the test. As for the police, they suspected David from the beginning, but lacked concrete evidence. In order to arrest David, the police gathered a lot of evidence to ensure that he was responsible for the crime. In fact, David himself probably thought that he had committed the crime perfectly and would never be discovered. A video from the gas station provided an important clue. Footage of the moment a man paid with Nicole's card showed that the man looked similar to David. Although the man was wearing a hat and sunglasses, making identification more difficult, the footage was a key clue in the case. Police also discovered that Nicole was not wearing her wedding ring. Nicole never left the house without it. Initially, police thought the ring had been stolen with other items, but the box containing the ring was later found on a dressing table in Nicole's home. Police discovered a mouth guard in Nicole's mouth during the autopsy. This was a device Nicole had been prescribed shortly before the tragedy, as she suffered from uncontrollable spasms of her chewing muscles due to anxiety, which led to worn enamel and chipped teeth. The presence of this device suggested that Nicole may have been murdered while she was still asleep in her bed. It is possible that David had forgotten that his wife was using a mouth guard because she had only recently started using it. In addition, the police examined the traces left in Nicole's car. Only David's and Nicole's fingerprints were found in the car. No traces of anyone else were found, suggesting that there was no third person involved in the murder. The investigation also shed light on Nicole and David's family situation at the time. David did not hold any permanent jobs and preferred to spend his time in bars and clubs, where David spent all of Nicole's earnings on alcohol and other women. The family was facing serious financial problems, and the situation became worse over time. Nicole tried to convince David to change his lifestyle and attend alcohol rehabilitation meetings to help David get back on track. However, David's response was indifferent and insulting. David had affairs with many women. Nicole's mother Gail knew about the serious problems in Nicole's family and tried to convince Nicole to leave David. However, Nicole did not want to do so because she loved David and hoped he would change. After Nicole's death, her husband David quickly received a large insurance payout and started a new relationship. Before that, David had been having an affair with a girl named Jane for several months. David often spent time with her at bars and clubs when Nicole was busy working or studying. Before Nicole's birthday, David brought his mistress home, where they were caught by Nicole. This incident became the cause of an argument in the family. Nicole told her mother about the incident, and a few days later, she mysteriously disappeared. Because Gail knew everything, she suspected David from the beginning. However, the police said that the evidence collected was too little to arrest the suspect. The case was kept secret and the family was never heard from again. When David received a large insurance payout after Nicole's death, he spent the money with his mistress, Jane. David appeared in court in September 2013 for his crimes. David received the maximum sentence possible under the laws of the state where the case was tried. David served 18 years in prison. However, in 2025, he could be eligible for parole after serving 2/3 of his sentence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Graciela Garcia. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1971, in Mexico. Her family was working class and they hoped to provide a better future for their children. As a result, her parents decided to move to the United States and eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. Graciela was too young to remember the hardships of the move. She attended Umatilla High School, a low-cost school where 66% of the student body was Hispanic. Graciela made friends easily and stood out with her outgoing. She later studied business at Blue Mountain College. However, since she was young, she has had a passion for hairdressing and has had the goal of owning her own hair salon. With passion and hard work, Graciela believed that her plans could come true with the right approach. By February 2006, she had become the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she quickly became famous in society. Moreover, her professional image also contributed to the prestige of the salon. She is passionate about her work and has a deep understanding of new beauty trends. Thanks to that, she always has a loyal customer base. Some of her customers have become close friends and are often invited to her home. She is respected and loved by everyone in town. Her private life is also filled with joy and happiness. She was pursued by many men when she was young, but she only loved one. That man became her first love. They have two beautiful daughters, Annabelle and Gabriella, often called Gabby. However, that love did not last long. The man left the family. It seems that his feelings for her faded over time. Despite becoming a single mother, she did not feel hopeless. Instead, she focused on self-improvement and pursued a degree in cosmetology. After her divorce, Graciela met Romero Sanchez, a regular customer at the beauty salon where she worked. At first, their relationship was just a friendship. However, Romero later asked Graciela out. And she accepted. Gradually, their relationship became closer and deeper. However, when Graciela introduced Romero to her family, they felt uncomfortable because of his cold and distant attitude. Annabelle and Gabby, Graciela's two daughters, tried many times to connect with Romero, but he did not respond. Graciela's children were confused by such behavior, but they attributed it to personality differences. Graciela's partner seemed to be a strange and unapproachable person, which puzzled the people around her. They could not believe that a woman as full of life and fun as her could be so passionately in love with such a dry person. However, they still respected her decision. When Graciela announced her upcoming marriage, everyone showed their support and shared her joy. Especially Annabelle and Gabby, they wanted to see her happy and loved. On the wedding day, guests also noticed Romero's arrogance and conceit. Some thought he seemed too jealous when trying to steal all the bride's attention. When Graciela's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Romero treated them with contempt, making them feel uncomfortable. Afterwards, Graciela's relatives could not hide their true feelings about this man. Annabelle even openly stated that she did not consider him a stepfather and just wanted to maintain a normal relationship like other families. After the wedding, the Graciela family had two more sons, Arthur and Jacob. They moved in together at Graciela's house. Graciela's youngest son, Jacob, noticed that Romero began to act as if he were the sole owner of the house. Initially, Graciela tried to set personal boundaries, but because she did not like confrontation, she quickly gave in to Romero. He was hot-tempered and never gave in or apologized first. To avoid creating tension in the family, Graciela continued to give in to Romero. However, over time, Graciela began to realize that she had rushed into this marriage. In conversations with her relatives, Graciela confessed that she felt constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and did not let her go anywhere alone. Despite this, Graciela never said she wanted to leave this abusive relationship. It seems she still loves him. Graciela's family gradually realized that she had become attached to the wrong man. Romero not only controlled Graciela but also lived off of his wife, much to her family's dismay. Romero was a skilled manipulator, constantly stalking Graciela, controlling her correspondence, and even threatening to break up the friendship between Graciela and her friends. He did not want to let her go anywhere, or sometimes he would show up unexpectedly, as if testing her loyalty. His jealousy became excessive and uncontrollable. She felt ashamed and self-conscious because of his behavior, and as a result, she limited her social life. She only communicated with her family and no longer connected with friends or colleagues as before. This seriously affected her work, as her profession required her to communicate regularly with clients and attend various events. Her friends and colleagues noticed a change in Graciela. She was no longer the cheerful and bright woman she used to be. She looked sad and tired, and she was clearly unhappy. Her children also noticed that she had changed in both her mood and appearance. They saw that she had lost her independence and confidence. After discussing it with each other, Graciela's family agreed that they did not like Romero. However, since he was Graciela's choice, there was not much they could do to change the situation. They could only respect her decision. Other relatives also expressed doubts about Romero, but no one knew how to help her in this situation. Graciela and Romero needed help with their relationship, and Gabby had mentioned this to her mother. However, Graciela believed that she would manage her personal life on her own. In 2018, Graciela decided to move her salon to her home for convenience. However, her family was skeptical as they had not heard about the plan for 12 years. Some customers commented that Romero's constant presence at the salon made them feel uncomfortable. Some people thought that Graciela moved the salon home to solve the problem, but others doubted that the idea came from Romero. However, Graciela was happy about the change and believed that working from home would bring her closer to Jacob and Romero. At the end of the year, she and her husband renovated a room into a beauty salon, completing it in May 2019. The salon closed shortly after, but Graciela's reputation remained intact, and rumors of her reopening attracted many customers, including new ones. Graciela was delighted with her career success, but became increasingly secretive about her personal life. However, after 17 years of marriage, Graciela and Romero decided to separate. Romero always kept in touch with their children and saw them regularly. Graciela and her ex-husband shared custody of their youngest son, while the other children were grown and living on their own, but they still kept in regular contact with their family and participated in family activities. Graciela went through the divorce with a calm and optimistic attitude. After the divorce, Graciela focused on developing her beauty salon and spent her free time taking care of her family and close friends. On the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero visited Graciela's eldest daughter, Annabelle, and reported Graciela missing. According to Romero, Graciela and he had been together the night before. However, when he woke up the next morning, he was surprised to find that she was no longer there. Romero tried to contact Graciela but received no response. Annabelle was shocked by the news and Romero's reaction. He cried and appeared distressed. This made Annabelle feel strange because Romero usually did not show emotions in front of them. Romero also said that Graciela had been acting strangely recently, even hinting that she might have found another man in her life. Annabelle felt that Romero's words were insincere and his tears seemed fake, which made her start to doubt his behavior and worry about her mother. Romero usually avoided communicating with his wife's children. But after a while, he changed and decided to connect with them. After Romero left, Annabelle decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Graciela's family gathers to find out what's happening to her. Graciela's car was parked in the driveway. If she decided to leave Romero, she would definitely use her own car. Another thing that surprised them was the neatness of Graciela's house. Everything was perfectly arranged and in order, far beyond normal. However, this was completely contrary to Graciela's personality and lifestyle, because if she went somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room. Normally, Graciela would spend a lot of time in front of the mirror choosing her outfit for the day. However, the fact that she went out without any jewelry worried the whole family, and they wondered why. As she walked around the house, Gabby noticed something strange. The large blanket had been put in the washing machine, something her mother never did. The blanket was too heavy and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero, which made Gabby suspicious. Romero did not explain this, saying that he did not pay attention to such details. But then people realized that several important items were missing from the house, including Graciela's passport, driver's license, and cell phone. This raised further suspicions about Romero's actions. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement at the police station and discovered something surprising. Although Romero had known about his wife's disappearance since the 9th or possibly earlier, he had not notified the police. Therefore, Annabelle was the first to file a missing persons report to her mother. Another incident raised concerns about Graciela's safety. She asked Gabby to pick her up, but even though Gabby said it would take some time because of the distance, Graciela continued to ask. Gabby was surprised by this unexpected request for help. Graciela explained that everything was fine and that her request was just a result of an argument with Romero. When they met, Graciela appeared relaxed, smiling and asking her daughter not to worry. She believed that arguments between lovers were just a form of renewal in their relationship. However, after they broke up, Gabby remained uneasy and became increasingly worried about her mother. The investigation began after Annabelle contacted the police. This caused the relationship between Graciela's family and Romero to deteriorate. Romero seemed angry that Graciela's family had notified law enforcement about her disappearance. Romero gave an official statement about his wife's disappearance. He said that Graciela either wanted to be alone or that she had moved in with another man and would be back soon. That was his answer every time someone asked. However, the police did not ignore this report. Officers launched an investigation into the missing Graciela's disappearance, considering the possibility that she may have been a victim of a crime. They started by searching her house, where her relatives reported that only a few personal items were missing, without finding any other suspicious signs. The investigation expanded to include interviews with her children, Romero, and other close family members, including her ex-husband. However, no useful information was gathered from these interviews. While everyone expressed doubts about Romero's behavior, he cooperated fully with the detectives, allowing them to search his home, answering questions, providing his DNA, and taking a polygraph test. Despite this cooperation, there was insufficient evidence to prove his involvement in the case. Further investigation revealed that Graciela's phone last sent a signal near a bridge in Washington on November 9th at 12:30 p.m. After that, her phone was turned off. Her bank accounts and social media accounts showed no activity, suggesting that she had not accessed since her disappearance. Hundreds of witnesses were questioned, and all the places she regularly visited were checked, but no one had any information about her whereabouts. The investigators found her disappearance to be highly suspicious, as it seemed she had vanished without leaving any clues. For months into the investigation, the Hermiston Police Department announced that they had found no reliable information about Graciela's last whereabouts. Although Romero had not reported her missing, he was not accused of any wrongdoing. Graciela's family became increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress despite their constant contact with authorities throughout the incident. However, as time passed, these updates became less frequent and eventually stopped, forcing Graciela's children to take initiative and contact the police station themselves to inquire about the status of the case. In an effort to reinvigorate the search, Graciela's family turned to the media in March 2020, seeking public assistance and attention. They hoped that by sharing their story, they might gather new information. Graciela's daughter Gabby was mainly in charge of communicating with the press. She expressed her family's increasing frustration with the lack of progress in the case and criticized the police for not keeping them informed for such a long time. She urged investigators to focus more on finding her mother, Graciela, and to take a closer look at the suspicious circumstances surrounding disappearance. Graciela's family suspected something was wrong, as the condition of her belongings was strange and unusual in her home. However, it was unclear who would want to harm her, as Graciela did not appear to have any enemies. The family also believed that Graciela would not have left on her own, as she would have contacted them to reassure. Posters and flyers describing Graciela were scattered throughout the city in search of clues to the case. Graciela, who is 49 years old, Latina, 1.6 meters tall, 62 kilograms, and with dyed blonde hair. Local residents were also asked to be vigilant and report any information that might help the investigation. Her children were so concerned that they asked for a new detective team to take over the case, as they suspected bias in collaboration with a suspect, Romero, who was acquainted with the original investigators. The Graciela family expressed concerns about several inconsistencies in the investigation, including the fact that Romero's phone was turned off on the day of Graciela's disappearance. Additionally, Romero's calm behavior raised suspicions, as it didn't with the typical reaction expected from someone whose loved one has suddenly gone missing. As a result, the Graciela family demanded that the suspect be arrested immediately. Police Chief Jason Edmiston responded to allegations surrounding Graciela's disappearance, confirming that her case is being treated as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, he emphasized that this is just one theory and that the investigation remains impartial, driven by evidence. Edmiston also dismissed claims of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as baseless. Edmiston noted that the spread of misinformation has hindered the investigation. Certain information must be kept confidential, and authorities have sought assistance from the FBI. The police chief expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions. Separately, Gabby organized a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move seen as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation. This perceived criticism suggested that the police were not doing enough to find Graciela. 1 year after Graciela disappeared, her family organized a memorial gathering. Here, friends and people who knew her shared stories about her lively and cheerful personality. They prayed for her safe return, lit candles, and later placed signs outside the police station, urging authorities to continue the search for Graciela Garcia. In September 2023, a major development in the case occurred when Romero Sanchez was severely injured in an attack and that required surgery. There was speculation that the shooter was Mason Garcia, Graciela's brother. The attack suggests that Graciela's family had become frustrated with the lack of progress in the investigation and took matters into their own hands, potentially leading to further tragedy. The disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in a state of agonizing. This has significantly affected the health and mental well-being of her family. Living without knowing what happened to a loved one can be more challenging than coping with a confirmed loss. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive or not. Her children continue to hope that the truth will soon be revealed and justice will be served to the criminals. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Channin Starbuck. Channin was born on April 19, 1969, in Anderson, Indiana. She was the youngest child in her family and grew up with 2 older brothers. However, her life changed dramatically when her parents divorced and remarried, giving her more siblings. From a young age, Channin dreamed of having a large and loving family of her own. She often participated in church activities and had a deep faith, which reinforced her dream. Channin grew up in a simple and friendly environment. She had a passion for painting and won many awards. When she was 20, she met Clay Starbuck, a 25-year-old man. They met at a party in Florida, where Shannon had moved with her family when she was a child. Clay Starbuck, originally from Alaska, came to Florida during his vacation. During their first meeting, Shannon learned a lot about Clay, including that he had attended a diesel mechanic school in Colorado after high school. He then returned home to work on the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and was financially stable. However, Shannon also learned that Clay was married and had 2 children from that marriage. Despite this, she was not discouraged by his complicated past. Instead, she saw it as a positive thing, believing that it gave him valuable experience for his married life. After getting married, Shannon and Clay moved in together. In the new place, Shannon had to overcome many difficulties related to the environment and weather, but she eventually adapted and settled down. However, married life was not as perfect as Shannon had planned. Shannon and Clay were often apart because of Clay's work, but their love helped her overcome her loneliness and wait for the day they could reunite. During that time, she cared for Clay's children from his previous marriage and had more children. In 1996, the Starbucks family welcomed their son Austin, followed by his brother Blake 3 years later. When their daughter Logan was born, the family was even more excited. However, Logan was soon diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, adding to the challenges of family life. Shannon had to deal with Logan's illness and try to support her daughter. She became a more caring and nurturing mother to her children. She spent time on health care, education, and community activities. But while she focused on raising her family, she did not realize that her husband was having an affair at work. As time passed, the Starbuck family continued to grow, and Shannon welcomed another daughter, Serena. Despite the hardships of life, she still tried to keep her family happy. But her husband's secret eventually came to light, and it would change her life forever. In 2000, Shannon filed for divorce after experiencing a great shock and feeling deeply betrayed. However, she still had feelings for Clay and decided to move to Arizona to start a new life. This attempt failed because she still loved Clay. When Clay contacted her and begged her to come back, Shannon believed that he had repented and decided to give him a second chance. In 2001, Shannon and Clay welcomed their 5th child, Marshall. However, Marshall's birth created new disagreements. Even an official remarriage in 2006 could not save their broken relationship. After the remarriage, the family moved to Deer Park in Spokane County, Washington. Clay continued to work at his previous job, which led to him being away from home often. Shannon had to manage her family and children on her own. However, suspicion continued to poison their marriage, which was affected by the long separations and breakups that occurred during their relationship. Finally, in 2010, Shannon and Clay divorced for good. When she turned 40, Shannon decided to rebuild her life once again. She still hoped that she could experience the joy of love. She was also determined not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Even when Clay was seriously injured, she chose not to get back together with him. Instead, she chose to support her ex-husband and provide help when needed. In February 2011, Clay quit his job and decided to settle down permanently in Deer Park. This brought him closer to his children and also closer to Shannon. However, he still hoped that Shannon would come back to him, but Shannon did not share the same views. After finding freedom, Shannon enjoyed her new life. Austin and Blake then moved in with their father, and they were happy to be away from their mother's constant supervision. Shannon found a part-time job and enrolled in a dental assistant course after her divorce. She had to take care of her family and provide for her children, especially when her ex-husband stopped paying child support due to illness. However, she still had another man to support her in case of emergency. Her children often stayed with this man every Wednesday and on the second and fourth weekends of the month. After completing the course and receiving her certificate, Shannon was proud and began to pursue a new dream. She created a profile on a dating website, hoping to meet a man who was worthy and could help her forget her past. She still regretted spending so many years with Clay, a man who did not appreciate her. However, one morning in December 2011, her dream was suddenly ended. On December 2, 2011, the police were notified that Shannon was unreachable. Her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, was the first to report. He reported that he had not been able to contact his ex-wife since December 1 around 3 p.m. Shannon had texted her daughter that she could not pick them up from school because she was not feeling well and asked her father to pick them up. However, his phone was turned off, so he did not know about her text. The two children, Marshall and Serena, were tired and hungry. As a result, Logan, 15, decided to call his brother and ask him to drive them to their father's house, which was a few blocks away. When they arrived, Austin said he had not been able to contact his mother either. She may have turned off her phone to rest and recover. Austin took the children to Clay's house. Clay was not expecting them but was very happy to see his children again. After the divorce, the older children lived with him, while the three youngest children lived with their mother. So the father decided to enjoy his time with his children and not bother Shannon. On December 2, Clay drove the children to school and went to Shannon's house. However, the front door was locked and the blinds were drawn. Since he did not have a spare key, he could not enter the house. Clay then sent a text message saying that if Shannon did not show up by 7 p.m., he would contact law enforcement. Time passed without Clay receiving a response from Shannon, so he went to the police and reported the situation. Two sheriffs went to the address provided but did not see anything suspicious and returned. The sheriff suggested waiting another day, and if she had not contacted him by then, he should return. Frustrated, Clay went home and waited for news. The next day, Clay went to the police station again. This time, the police told him that he was not the only one reported missing. A friend and Shannon's mother were also unable to contact her. This did not fit her personality. This time, the police took a more serious approach to the case. Many of Shannon's relatives began to worry. After receiving the necessary permission, the police returned to Shannon's house to investigate. When they arrived, the police broke the lock and entered. Initially, they saw no signs of forced entry or robbery. Everything seemed to be in its place. However, when they entered Shannon's bedroom, they discovered an unexpected detail: a broken statue. Then came the horrifying scenes. Shannon, 42, was found lying on her back on the floor of her bedroom in a provocative pose. On her stomach was an erotic massage tool. She had hoped for a better future, but fate did not give her the chance to fulfill her dream. Shannon's body was covered in bruises and scratches. The medical examiner's report showed that some of the injuries on her body were caused by a stun gun. There was also evidence that her body had been moved. Shannon's cause of death was strangulation. It was the detective's job to figure out Shannon's last hours and find the culprit. The police realized that Shannon Starbuck had not only disappeared but had also been brutally murdered. Her room looked as if it had been turned upside down. The bed was unmade, the blankets and sheets were missing, and the mattress cover was stained red. Shannon's cell phone and diary were on the dresser. Forensic experts focused on this room and examined all surfaces for fingerprints. Some surfaces had been wiped clean, but they found 12 latent fingerprints on the massager and the bathroom mirror. They also found many other traces in common areas for DNA analysis. Experts took samples from under Shannon's fingernails on her face and neck. Detectives suspect that Shannon was killed after she left the bathroom, then placed on the bed, and finally dragged to the floor. It is worth noting that the removed bed sheets were found in the washing machine, possibly intended to destroy evidence. The detectives needed to gather information about Shannon and her lifestyle. So, after the ex-husband calmed down, they questioned him. Clay explained that he and his ex-wife had an arrangement regarding child pickup and drop-off. Every morning, he picked up the younger kids and took them to school, and she picked them up after school. Clay said that on the morning of December 1st, his car broke down a few blocks from home. So he texted Shannon, asking her to take the kids to school. He then went home to wait for the car to warm up, thinking that would help it start. Around 11 a.m., he tried to restart the car but was unsuccessful. He gave up and went back inside to take a nap. During that time, his cell phone battery died. To back up his claim, he showed his correspondence with his ex-wife. At first, everything made sense. Furthermore, Clay was very cooperative, handing over his cell phone, DNA sample, and fingerprints. He also confessed that he was worried about Shannon because the divorce had made her more vulnerable. In addition, he shared that because she was single, Shannon had registered on a dating website and had many admirers. According to Clay, it is possible that Shannon had several lovers at the same time. He believes that one of them may have caused her death. However, he could not name them specifically due to a lack of information. During the conversation, Clay sobbed. He explained that accepting the death of his ex-lover was very difficult. After taking his statement, the police let Clay go home. He was faced with informing his children about Shannon's death. The case involving Shannon Starbuck's death has attracted public attention. Investigators interviewed the Starbucks neighbors, focusing on details, especially reports of strange people and vehicles appearing outside her home in recent weeks. An autopsy was performed, and the report found that Starbucks suffered chest injuries consistent with the use of a stun gun. She also suffered 10 broken ribs. The injuries to her head and body were severe and likely caused by a blunt object. Because of the appearance of the injuries, it was difficult to determine the exact time of death. Scratch marks on her body indicated that she had been moved after she was killed. The medical examiner's report indicated that a soft object was used to strangle her, possibly a hand, a towel, or a sheet. A key clue in the case came from the body samples collected, including the DNA of a man, suggesting that the suspect may have been a close acquaintance of hers. Shannon's family hopes the police will quickly find the culprit. Shannon's ex-husband, Clay Starbuck, has cooperated fully with the investigation. He underwent a physical examination to look for any signs of injury on his body, but none were found. As detectives speculated that the culprit may have been injured during the struggle, there was no evidence of that. Shannon's two sons, Austin, 21, and Blake, 18, were also examined. Austin had old cuts on his hands, but he explained that these cuts were from his job at a window factory. In conversations with the two brothers, detectives established some important facts. They learned that their mother often dated men after the divorce, which made them unhappy. The brothers also said they had seen intimate photos on their mother's laptop, which led them to suspect that their mother may have been murdered by a lover. However, it was clear that they both loved their mother and were deeply saddened by her passing. Nonetheless, they did not agree with the changes in her life. In a later interview, Clay was more specific. He said Shannon caused discord in the family when he was away on business. She often met other men, and he even suspected that Marshall might not be his son. However, he still loved Marshall like his own son. He did not agree with some of Shannon's actions, especially the fact that she often brought the children to his house when she went on dates. However, investigators gained a personal view of Shannon and her family after speaking with him, her children, and her relatives and friends. After the investigation, detectives had a complete picture of Shannon in her life. The kindness and concern of those who attended Shannon's funeral on December 10, 2011, showed that she was an intelligent and sincere person. She was buried in a cemetery in Orlando. Investigators quickly searched for the killer after the incident attracted public attention. The suspect at that time was her ex-husband, Clay Starbuck. Police needed to verify his alibi to eliminate him as a suspect. When the first fingerprint results came back, detectives discovered that the fingerprints did not match any at the scene. Therefore, the police needed to gather more information about Clay Starbuck. They also took samples from his cell phone, laptop, and personal diary. At the same time, they also considered the possibility that other people were involved in the murder. After a thorough examination of Starbuck's cell phone, detectives added several names to the suspect list. One of them was someone Channon had connected with through a dating site. They discovered that a man named Tom Walker had scheduled a date with Channon on December 5th, a few hours before her death. They also discovered that Tom and Channon had been chatting openly and exchanging photos. Tom had asked Channon to pose for a photo with an adult toy, but she refused. Interestingly, Channon's body was later found in the exact pose Tom had mentioned. Tom was found within an hour and immediately became a suspect. He explained his activities on the day of Channon's death, which was confirmed by co-workers and surveillance cameras. John Wilson then scheduled a date with Channon on December 1st. It was clear from their correspondence that he was not looking for a serious relationship. However, the truth is that John Wilson used a fake name. His real name is John Kinlawn, who works in a completely different field and is married, so he had to keep it a secret. On the day of the incident, John Kinlawn postponed his morning meeting with Channon until later, citing a headache. In the end, the appointment did not take place. After his DNA sample was taken, he was released. His alibi was confirmed, even though his deception was revealed to his family. The investigation continued, and investigators uncovered some important evidence. When they searched Channon's phone, they asked the carrier for more information and discovered something significant. At 9:18 a.m. on December 1st, a 911 call was made from Channon's phone, but someone had deleted it from the call history. Thanks to a request from emergency services, investigators were able to retrieve the call. However, the call contained only crying and other noises before it was abruptly cut off. Investigators also discovered that after the initial call was unsuccessful, emergency services attempted to call back, but the call went to voicemail. GPS data from Channon's cell phone pinpointed her location at home on the day of her death. Notably, these events occurred after she dropped her children off at school and returned home. Therefore, the messages sent a few hours later could not have been from her. The perpetrator was trying to confuse the investigation. Additionally, this person had a close relationship with the Starbuck family. For example, he used a nickname for their youngest son in his correspondence. Upon closer examination of the information, Clay's statements became even more suspicious. He had a motive to end his ex-wife's life because he could not accept the reality of the divorce. Moreover, he had the perfect opportunity to do this because he knew her daily routine. To clarify the suspicion, the authorities decided to track Clay's car route again, this time using street surveillance camera recordings. The results showed that Clay's car was not broken down as he had claimed. Simultaneously, the results of a second DNA analysis from Channon's body matched exactly with Clay's sample. On the morning of December 1st, Clay sent a text message to his ex-wife, asking her to take the kids to school and saying that his car had broken down. While she was away, he entered her home and waited. During this time, he accessed her laptop and found personal correspondence that made him jealous and angry. When Channon returned home, a heated argument ensued that ended in violence. This explains why she was found in an unusual position. This may have been an act of revenge for her newly gained freedom. Clay then stayed at the house and impersonated Channon in text messages. It seems that he had long intended to harm his ex-wife. The words of a friend of Channon's took on new meaning for detectives. In one conversation, the friend mentioned that Clay and Channon's relationship was not normal. Channon confessed that she was fed up with Clay's constant control and criticism. She was afraid of divorce because she feared that he might one day hurt her. Between June and November 2011, Channon contacted the police several times, accusing her ex-husband of stalking her. She felt unsafe even in her own home and therefore did not trust anyone with a key. She eventually managed to obtain a restraining order against Clay, so their communication was limited to text messages. A careful examination of Channon's diary makes it clear that she was not only afraid of her ex-husband but also believed that he was turning the children against her. Clay fabricated lewd stories and portrayed her as promiscuous. The children's reaction to their father's arrest on February 6, 2012, is therefore not surprising. They refused to believe his involvement. The children were unfazed by the fact that a tracking program was found on Channon's laptop and a hard drive labeled Channon's desktop was found in Clay's home, along with printed correspondence. The older children doubted the authenticity of the DNA analysis, believing that the accusations against their father were unfounded and that the case was fabricated. However, the views of law enforcement and other relatives were different. The prosecution was convinced of Clay's guilt, relying on a large amount of physical and testimonial evidence. In June 2013, justice prevailed, and Clay Starbuck was convicted of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances and disrespect for human remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2015, Clay's attorney filed an appeal of the sentence, but it was denied. To this day, Clay remains behind bars at the Airway Heights Correctional Facility in Spokane County. Channon's loved ones mourn her sudden passing, but their hearts are even more broken by the thought that her children sided with their father. He was so obsessed with his ex-wife that, in his quest for revenge, he forgot the consequences, leaving his children orphaned. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers was born on May 30, 1962, in Long Island, New York. From a young age, he was known for his charisma, reliability, and diligence. He also served in the Marine Corps Reserves. After graduating from Norfolk State University, Vincent moved to California in the mid-1980s to pursue further education and eventually earned a master's degree. Despite having a successful career as a school administrator, Vincent's personal life was marred by tumultuous relationships. His two previous marriages ended in divorce. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, Vincent had a daughter with his girlfriend. He took his girlfriend to court to establish paternity and was eventually awarded custody and visitation rights. Initially required to pay $350 per month in child support, this amount was increased to $771 in 2003. That same year, Vincent was convicted of wife abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and probation. In 1992, Vincent married for the second time, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1996 due to accusations of intimidation and physical abuse by his second wife. While serving as the assistant principal at Emerson High School, Vincent was accused of sexually harassing a colleague. The woman claimed that Vincent assaulted her at his home and took her phone to prevent her from calling the police. When she tried to report the incident to the police, she said police discouraged her from pursuing charges because she was afraid of Vincent's reputation. The harassment continued at school, with Vincent allegedly touching her inappropriately. The woman eventually resigned from her job as a teacher, citing an unfriendly work environment. The school district investigated Vincent due to his increasingly threatening behavior and threatening phone calls. Despite Vincent denying the allegations and having no disciplinary record, the school district transferred him to another school as a precaution. Vincent then began working at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, where he also became famous and respected. Vincent was especially known for ensuring the safety of students by taking them home after school. While teaching at Fremont Elementary School, Vincent met Joni Harper, the school's security supervisor and basketball manager. Vincent and Joni began dating and eventually married after the birth of their first child, Marcus. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. However, Vincent's infidelity caused him and Joni to divorce in September 2001. 2 years later, Vincent and Joni remarried in secret, and their third child, Marshall, was born 4 months later. Joni eventually opened up to her friends about the problems in her marriage. Unlike before, she expressed her fear that Vincent might harm her. However, to those around them, Vincent's family appeared happy and actively involved in the community, often attending local events and maintaining good relationships with others. From the outside, Joni and Vincent's marriage seemed stable. Joni continued to work as a basketball manager, pursuing her passion. However, no one expected that the tragic events hidden behind the family's happy exterior would soon emerge. 3 months before the tragic event, Vincent had moved out of the house due to frequent arguments with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On July 6, 2003, Joni attended a church service with her 3 children, Marcus, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, as well as her mother, Ernestine. The family had lunch at Black Angus after the ceremony, then returned home for a nap. As was their custom, Joni and the children stayed in one bedroom, while Ernestine stayed in another room in the house. Tragically, the family was attacked in their home. The killer easily entered the house without signs of forced entry and shot Joni twice in the head while she was in the bedroom. Lindsay was also shot in the back. The noise alerted Ernestine, causing her to quickly arm herself with a .38 revolver and move toward the hallway to investigate. Unfortunately, she was killed before she could defend herself. The attacker shot Ernestine twice in the face, causing her to collapse in the hallway outside her bedroom. The attacker then entered the room and shot Marcus, followed by a fatal shot to the baby's back. Each shot was aimed very carefully. Instead of fleeing the scene immediately, the attacker went to the kitchen to get a knife and then returned to the bedroom. There, the attacker stabbed the victims multiple times in the back. On July 8, 2003, Kelsey Spann, Joni's best friend, became worried when she had not heard from Joni, Ernestine, and Joni's children since they went to church the previous Sunday. Kelsey decided to go to Joni's house to check on them using the key Joni had given her. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it difficult to open due to an obstacle. She then went to the back of the house and found an unlocked sliding glass door, which was unusual. Upon entering the house, Kelsey discovered Joni, her mother Ernestine, and Marcus, Lindsay, and Marshall, all dead. Kelsey immediately contacted authorities at 7 a.m. They arrived at the scene and discovered 5 family members brutally murdered. The family's peaceful home, located in a quiet neighborhood, became the scene of a horrific crime. The police investigation concluded that the family had been tragically killed on Sunday afternoon as they returned from church. Before leaving the scene, the perpetrator covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. Detectives identified Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries, suggesting the attacker had been extremely angry. Police were concerned about Vincent's safety and discovered he had been in Ohio. Detective Watts traveled to North Carolina, where Vincent was visiting his mother with his brother Melvin. When North Carolina police met with Vincent, they found him severely traumatized and unable to speak coherently, which did not provide many details about the investigation. Vincent's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer, and because he had been on the other side of the country when the murder occurred, police initially ruled him out as a suspect. He also provided receipts showing purchases made around the time of the tragedy, confirming that he had not been in Bakersfield, California, where the incident occurred. However, Detective Watts still doubted Vincent's innocence. Notably, Vincent never asked how his wife and children had died, which aroused suspicion. On July 11, 2003, Vincent had returned to Los Angeles without attending their family's memorial service, but Vincent had attended their funeral 5 days later. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Vincent had moved out of his family home in April 2003. Additionally, his wife, Joni, had been planning to divorce him again and had sought child support. Authorities also discovered that Vincent had had a history of violence against women, which had led them to take a closer look at his alibi. Upon further investigation, surveillance video from the store's checkout counters had shown that Melvin, not Vincent, had made the purchase at that time. When confronted, Melvin revealed that Vincent had told him to make these purchases in Vincent's name. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find any witnesses who had seen Vincent between the evening of July 4th and the evening of July 7th. Both Melvin and his family insisted they had not seen Vincent during this time. Although there was no direct evidence linking Vincent to the murder, police discovered he had some suspicious activities. Vincent had rented a car when he had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, and he had stayed at his brother's house. Police suspected Vincent had flown to Columbus on July 2, 2003 to visit family, then returned to Bakersfield on July 4, where the tragic incident had occurred on July 6. He was supposed to return to Ohio on July 7 and had arrived late that evening. Law enforcement had conducted a thorough inspection of the Dodge vehicle, paying special attention to its radiator and air filter. To help identify insects found in the car, investigators had enlisted the expertise of Dr. Lynn Kimsey from the Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kimsey carefully had analyzed the insects and identified more than 100 species, including several species found only in the western region beyond the Rocky Mountains. The presence of some insects suggested that Vincent had moved at night. By carefully analyzing the insects, Dr. Kimsey had been able to plot a path that showed the car had traveled west from Ohio. Investigators later had tracked down the 5 previous car renters and confirmed that none of them had driven the car to California or near the Rocky Mountains. Police also had examined photographic evidence and found the end of a rubber glove in the laundry room. DNA testing showed a match. It belonged to none other than Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent had been planning to leave town and had begun selling his assets, including putting his house on the market. As a result, Vincent had been arrested on April 30, 2004 and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution argued that Vincent's motive for the murder had been financial, suggesting he had acted out of fear of having to pay child support due to his impending divorce from Joni. The prosecution portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who often had disappeared for long periods of time and who could become violent. To support their case, the prosecution called several witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, who testified that the insects found in the Dodge were consistent with insects commonly found along Interstate 70. This testimony was further supported by evidence showing 5,424 miles had been driven from July 2 to July 11 in accordance with the prosecution's statement. However, when Melvin had appeared in court, he tried to change his previous testimony, claiming that he had lied to the police about Vincent giving him a credit card to use. In response, the defense presented an expert on high-speed driving, who argued that maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour during the trip from Ohio to California had been extremely difficult. The defense also presented its pathologists, who testified that the murders could have occurred as late as Monday morning, July 7, 2003. The defense also had presented interrogation tapes to prove that Melvin had been pressured by police to change his statement. Additionally, they called a witness who claimed to have seen a car accident involving Vincent on Sunday morning, in which a boy on a bicycle had collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. Although the incident had not been reported to the police due to the lack of damage or injuries, the prosecution attempted to verify the story. Vincent had taken it upon himself to defend himself. He had strongly denied all accusations about his married life and had firmly denied the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent had become emotional and had shed tears several times. The prosecution had called Carla Tuya, principal of Franklin School, as a witness. She had testified about her past relationship with Vincent, which had begun in 1996 when his son was born and had ended in 2002 when she had decided to end it. Carla revealed a shocking secret that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, directly contradicting Vincent's previous denials about everything. This admission had damaged Vincent's claim to fidelity to his family. The prosecution had argued that the crime had been carefully planned in advance. Thanks to knowing the family's Sunday habits, the murderer had gained an advantage and had had the opportunity to strike. The perpetrator had taken advantage of this and had waited until the whole family was asleep, then had used the spare key to enter the house through the sliding glass door and had killed each family member. On May 15, 2017, Vincent had been found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. The jury had reached this decision after hearing testimony from 137 witnesses and deliberating for nearly 2 days. After the verdict, Vincent had been removed from the courtroom and had been returned to the Luro detention facility under tight security. Then, on September 27, 2007, Dirk County Superior Court Judge Michael Bush had sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection.